We'll now call this Area Plan Commission meeting, the October 16th Fayette County Area Plan Commission to order. Will you please join me in the pledge to the flag? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we have a roll call.
Ruby Seiler.
Present.
Leota.
Present.
Brian.
Here.
Ed.
Here.
Gary Naylor.
Present.
Kay Riker Payton. Here. Chad Frank.
Here.
Bill Mackey.
Here.
Stephanie McCann. Bill McDaniel.
Present.
And Jeff Westling.
Here.
And myself.
So we do have a quorum. Next, we have approval of the minutes for the meeting of September the 9th. You should have a copy of those minutes in front of you. Any questions?
Motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Thank you,
I will
Brian.
second.
Thank you. Have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the September 9th, 2019 meeting. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Next on the agenda is a public hearing for new petition number 14856. Petitioner Richard J. and Susan M. Owen, who I think are here with us tonight. So, the floor is yours.
Sir, my name is David Nethery. I represent National Oil and Gas. Rich and Susan contacted our company, it's been about a year ago, to kind of help them and guide them into putting pumps in for their convenience store. So that's my capacity here. I will say, I've been in this business for 30 years. I'm a retailer myself. Me and my wife run our own business, but I also represent this jobber. We're the biggest marathon jobber in the Midwest, so we know what we're doing. We've been around since 1920, or the company has. You're probably wondering why we need another gas station. You know, everybody wants a gas station, but the thing that I love about this couple here, they're similar to me and my wife. They're a fixture in the community, and adding pumps is gonna just help their business. They are in there all the time. People respect that, and they know them. So it's just, I think it's a slam dunk win. This is not just another, company op business that, the owners aren't there, and, these guys have a vested interest in it, so, I'm open for any questions.
Could you run through the, how it meets the criteria, different individual criteria that we actually have for the boards to approve?
Well, I know it's an exception. It does,
Well, yeah.
it's an exception, so, I think it's just gonna add to the business for them. I don't think it's gonna disrupt the neighborhood. They live right there. In our contracts, most of the oil companies require 18 hours of business. We're a little bit more flexible. I would imagine the hours of operation would probably be like 5 a.m. to 11, maybe Monday through Saturday, shorter hours on Sunday. The signage would be all relevant to whatever your zoning is. We've got all different types of signs that would not, really detract from the neighborhood. The equipment that we're providing is state-of-the-art. It'll be a nice, beautiful canopy and 3 brand new MPDs or dispensers. So honestly, I just think it would add really to their whole business there. I can't, and I gotta be honest with you, I can't speak to all the stipulations in your zoning.
Well, okay. Well, it's just that what we did have is that, I think I provided the letter and then also the new site plan. were provided by Mr. Gobin for Mr. and Mrs. Owen. And they did meet my concerns within the, that I had, for example, as far as the public health, safety, and general welfare, it's that my concern was provided the vehicle circulation plan is
Yes.
submitted and fixed. It meets that health, general, and safety, welfare.
And I will say, sir, not to interrupt you, but we kind of threw it at our architect and said, hey, let's look at this, kind of
Yeah.
not a challenging site to put pumps on, but I'm not quite sure why he had the entry and exit the way he did on the property. Obviously, it makes better sense to have the furthest west entrance be the entry in, and then the two east ones are the entries out.
Yeah. Well, it would kind of work though if you were in the UK or South Africa or Australia.
Yeah, exactly. It just didn't make sense, and that's something that we just missed.
Yeah, so they took care of that.
Sure.
And because they took care of that, then I just had that's just as the actual site lighting is, and what would be required on the site lighting. So it's designed because it's minimal impact, excuse me, I hate that, effect on nearby residential properties
Yeah.
because they're all located down toward the west and they'd be blocked from view. And then typically anymore as site design, lighting design is done on the site, it's strictly a downcast, so it really doesn't. Exactly.
Yeah, I know, all the canopy lighting would be LED, but it will be shining down. There's
Exactly.
really no,
Yeah.
a lot of times we'll design them with LEDs around the perimeter on the top of the canopy. You definitely don't want that here because, you've got the neighborhood and you don't want that shining in somebody's house. They don't want that shining in their house since their property adjoins it.
Yeah.
So,
And then it's a piece of infill development. And it's in a business area and it's actually making more use. So that's one points they actually made. And so yeah, there really isn't isn't going to affect the normal orderly development. And okay, you have all the roads and the access roads are all there and all the utilities. Okay, they took care of my concern over the traffic congestion in the public streets by changing the in and out, ingress and egress. And then the only concern I had with that was on the unintended consequences. It could have been what was happening on Indiana 44. And so they took care of all of those.
as far as any safety concerns, as far as the underground storage tanks, everything now is so regulated and state of the art.
Well, those are all, yeah, because I know with the permitting process going
It's,
through.
yeah, it's, everything is,
What about signage?
we have, we can do monument, we can do canopy signage. I think your zoning requirement was no more than 15 feet tall. Looking at their site, you would prefer a taller sign. I think a monument would be fine if you guys were more comfortable with that. As I drive up, and I'm pretending I'm a fueling customer now, I'm driving up there, your Clark sign is a small monument, like a whatever small sign. A monument would work. He kind of wanted a small goalpost, if you will. So it would be two pricers, one for regular, one for diesel, and maybe a small panel for your proprietary sign. But we'll do whatever, we can do whatever the zoning requires, whatever you're comfortable with. There, Marathon makes a sign for everything.
Yeah. Well, like I said, 15 feet is the maximum height.
Yeah.
And so I know I believe there's certain sizes that the signs actually have to be as far as what federal standards, I think, or is it state highway standards?
It's basically by zoning,
Okay. All
so.
right. Well,
The key for them is, in the gas business, it's all about, it's the only business I know that you've got to flash your number one product out there for everybody to see, in a sign. So they want to have a sign that people will not just fly by. They've got to be able to see the price sign.
Yep.
So that's our only concern. But of course, we do it within the zoning requirements.
Yeah.
So,
because Yeah, because Mrs. Owen then brought in the one particular sign that they were gonna go with, which was a monument sign.
I gave that to them as an example. I mean, we could do that, and then they got various.
Because with monument sign, you can go up to 15 feet, you can have a pretty good amount of information on it.
Sure,
It's just making sure it's set back far enough from there, not
absolutely.
to obscure the
Well,
use of traffic.
we've got so many projects going within the city of Indianapolis, all around the state. We're used to, meeting the zoning requirements for signage. It's really hard in Indy.
Yep.
So, whatever needs to be done.
Where are the storage tanks in this schematic? Are they under the pumps? Or
No, they're gonna
or is
be,
it
I would imagine,
I just wasn't aware.
I would imagine, when he met with our contractor, the contractor they're gonna use, that the storage tank farm is gonna be back here. They're gonna do 2 tanks, which should facilitate what they need. And then, I can imagine the tanker just coming in, circling around, fueling, and being able to leave. It's our own tank fleet. They'll get serviced out in Muncie, Marathon's terminal up there, so. Yep. Any other questions, concerns?
Bill,
Hey, Gary.
does this petition cover the tanks as well, or will there be a separate
No,
special exception
it'll
for
be,
the tanks?
it'll be part of the same one, because this is just taking care of the site and the site zoning, and everything as far as the tanks go themselves, the installation, those are all things that are actually under the purview and the authority of the state of Indiana.
Okay.
And that's something they have regulation over, so we don't have the regulatory control over that.
Okay. And a couple other questions. After hours, the pumps will be completely shut down, or they'll be pump it, pay at the pump only?
No. I mean, like I said, I've been in business for a long time. I never do that, and I'm on a highway site. We shut down at night. I don't trust, the American public to not rip a nozzle off and cause a big gas spill. No
Okay.
way. Yeah, you keep them off.
And
Yeah.
number 2, when you say you've been in the gas business for several years, and when you come to a new town or city, how do you determine whether they can use another gas station?
There's
or not?
market studies.
And has there been a market study done for this?
I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm gonna tell you that it's the educated opinion from me. I know he talked to Herdrick. I'm glad that I'm talking to you instead of Herdrick. We lose enough to those guys. The marathon rep, we wouldn't spend the money. Now, we're investing in this too. We've got blood in the
Okay,
game. We're providing them with 3 dispensers at $15,000 apiece. We're, providing all the imaging at, honestly, $50,000 for all the marathon imaging and the sign, which will be another, probably 15. So we've got blood in the game.
Okay.
So if we didn't
That's
think it
one
would,
thing that I
if we
was
don't
curious
think it's gonna work, I'm not gonna put somebody in business. Like I said, honestly, guys, the strength is these people right here, because I've been in their business enough, they run it. I get tired of, everybody wants a gas station. I get tired of going to these sloppy stations where, trying to be politically correct here, but you got some poor kid that can't speak English, she's just stuck in there, the place is filthy. That just appalls me, because I'm in the retail business. It's not hard to run a good business in America, you just, these people work their business. So I think by letting them do pumps, it's gonna add quite a bit to their profitability and be good for them, so. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
You didn't sign it, but your name is,
It's hard to spell. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Sign in here?
sign in there, please.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, is there anyone who wants to speak in opposition to this petition?
It's not so much an opposition, I just need to know where they're gonna be located, the pumps, because we live right across the street from there. So we need to know where things are gonna be located to see if it's gonna impede our ability to leave our driveway. and things of that nature.
Which side of the station or the,
We're right across the street.
oh,
off
just directly
44,
across the
yes.
street?
We're just curious where things are gonna be located.
The canopy and the,
If that would be great if we could have one of those.
absolutely.
Thank you.
You know, the traffic, I don't know how much more traffic's gonna be
I know,
beyond
it's
what
44.
Rich's, Susie already get. But, so here is the east side, it'll be right like this. This is,
Just down from the church, right?
So it's gonna be in front.
yep,
This is the building right now.
so people are gonna be pretty much pulling in.
Jerry has a little bit better idea where all the buildings are, so that might help them understand better.
Like me to go, you cut me off the lane. Up at January.
I think, I mean, it's kind of the natural way it is now, where they get whacked by a truck coming down 44 and you can have that copy.
Okay. Any other comments from the public? Okay, I will. Public hearing closed and open the floor for discussion from members of the commission.
Is this strictly for the gas pumps? I thought there was something said about a restaurant. Is that just what you already have? That you still already have in the building? So this is just an addition of gas pumps?
Right.
Question, Mr. Chairman. And I apologize for not asking it earlier, but you made the comment there'd be gas and diesel,
Yes,
but there won't be accommodations for any truck diesel.
if they can get underneath the canopy, but it's not a truck stop. In other words, it's not tax exempt. It's
Okay.
not like you see the big speedway sites that have the three, if you will, truck islands to the side. No, there would be one dispenser that'll have diesel on it,
But
unleaded.
I guess what I was wondering with this traffic pattern, did we accommodate for semi,
You're not gonna get semis in there.
That's
other
what
than
I-
a tanker.
yeah.
They just won't stop.
just the
because they can't.
tankers,
Yeah.
the delivery tankers? Okay.
You'll get people that will be pulling equipment or somebody that's got a nice diesel truck pulling a boat or something.
Yeah, I was,
Sure.
car and pickup was what I was
Yes, yeah.
wondering,
Yep.
more than, so than a semi. Okay.
Any other discussion?
I move the discussion be closed.
Discussions are closed. We're ready for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve this, we're sending this to the, we're approving this into the
Favorable recommendation.
favorable recommendation, I can't talk right. Favorable recommendation to the BZA.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to forward a favorable recommendation, BZA, for petition number 14856. Are there any questions on the motion? Hearing none, call for the vote. Roll call, please.
Ruby Seiler,
Yes.
Leota King,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Ed Harrell,
Yes.
Gary Naylor,
Yes.
Kay Riker Payton,
Yes.
Chad,
Yes.
Bill Mackey.
Yes.
And that's it.
All right.
We appreciate your time.
Petition
Thank
is
you very
approved.
much.
We'll go get a little discount.
You have a favorable recommendation.
So you still have to hang around till the next meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. But If you could vacate the seats
Yes.
right now, because we do have some other people that would like to use those.
Leave for now.
Hair care and tire center to get
Sit out in the hallway.
You can do everything in Florida.
Oh, yeah.
Pay your bills, get gas. I'm waiting for
Nice drawing.
the barber shop, that's coming.
Nice
next.
drawing,
Barber
buddy.
shop, nail salon.
You still do it,
Nothing,
can't you?
like,
Yeah.
you can't do it in
I do it
Florida.
all the time. So.
Pretty soon there'll be a laundromat.
I do it by hand, you notice that?
Yeah, I noticed that.
Flowers, like, you can do everything with them. There are a dozen roses in a gallon in the same place.
Eat your lunch.
And a chicken sandwich.
They do have good food.
Okay, moving to the next item on our agenda. We'll have a continuation of petition number 14798. Petitioner Mark J. and Dina J. Bills. Special exception 45 for a public recreation facility. I guess I better do this one. Share the public.
I do have a question, is that you're all familiar with what's in it. I've got a cold and my voice is going in and out all day.
Thank
Would
you.
you actually like me to go through and then read appropriate sections of the staff report?
No need on our behalf.
Okay, all right.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First off, just wanted to start off saying thank you for the opportunity to come and present before you. My name is John Bills. I'm actually the son of Mark and Dina. So it's rare I get the chance to speak occasionally at public forums, but rarely for something that I care as much about as my parents. So I'm just appreciative to get to come tonight to talk to you a little bit about the special exception that they're asking for. I've got a presentation that I just handed out. I'm going to run through, talk a little bit about here with the PowerPoint. Real quick on the agenda, just going to give a quick overview of a background of the property, where it's located, a little bit about the applicants. Then demonstrate that they do have community support of all of the residents in the immediate vicinity that they've spoken with. And then the meat of the presentation that I'll go through is just demonstrating how we believe we're meeting the 6 criteria that's needed in order to get a special exception approved in Fayette County. And then we'll close out with any questions that you may have for us. So everybody's probably familiar at this point with where it's located, but my parents' property, it's a 10-acre parcel that's located on the Fayette-Rush County line. You can see it here, the main parcel. I've got the stars located where the actual structure is built and where we want the public recreation facility to go in at and be present. And then you can see just the proximity map of where that's located in conjunction with Connersville and where we're located here currently. A little bit of background on them. So my father, Mark, he's been a member of the community and lived within a mile of this property his entire life. So he's very familiar with Fayette County, with the surrounding, with all the neighbors. He's been just a good member of the community for a long time, for his entire life. He grew up there farming. He joined his father on the family farm and has been doing that full time for over 45 years. Meanwhile, they raised 3 children, one of which was me. And Dina joined my mom, moved back to the vicinity, into the community after they were at college together at Purdue. So, the community does mean a lot to him. He's been there for a long time. They bought that property actually a little over 30 years ago, and it was for my grandparents, my mother's parents, to move into. So they've owned the property a long time. Unfortunately, once they passed, Mark and Dina moved into the property, and they've lived on that property for over 15 years now. So a long history there. Like many, they're starting to get up there, so it's been a big part of their life being there, as well as they're nearing the retirement age for them. A lot of their net worth, a lot of their value and their retirements in that property and in that surrounding area of the ground that they have. The next slide on there that you have in your packet, it's just an overview of the plat of survey, which really shows the location of it. Nothing in particular I wanted to hit on here, but it just shows how the structure is built and a little bit on the background and timeline of that. You know, unfortunately, we did put in, or my parents put in the structure preemptively, or before. We actually had reached out back then, before we built it. We reached out through our attorney, and then we actually had a local attorney here to Fayette County reach out. And we're under the impression that we didn't need a special exception initially when we did it. And that because it stayed underneath the square footage requirements and that, so they actually had put it in. As soon as we found out that it was something that required a special exception, we took the steps and made the application to try to remedy that. But it was due to miscommunication between our attorneys and staff at the time that we weren't under the impression that we needed to initially. So here's part of that application of us, so obviously that we submitted in trying to make sure that we complied with the proper codes and regulations. Because of that, you can see here's what it looks like. This is what is being discussed today and what is actually already built. You can see it's picnic shelter, picnic table that's there, driveway, a roped off area there with some additional grass. Community support. So as we've gone through this, I mean, obviously there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of debate, even within the community. But you know, before our last hearing, Dad went through and he talked to the neighbors. He talked to community around. This was submitted as part of our supplemental information. And he went out and he actually spoke to 47 different people within the general vicinity of where it's located. Not a single member or person that he talked to in the community said they were against it or they thought that it shouldn't be there. 100% of the people he spoke to actually signed the petition and said they were in favor of this. Whereas that may not play into the regulations, it may not play into that, but part of what being on a public board and looking out for the welfare of the community is the constituents that vote that are part of that they are supportive of it, that they believe in it. And these are people that live in close proximity. These aren't people across the county or from, 10 miles away in Rush County. These are the people that actually live and have their families in close proximity to where this is at. Here's just a few of the comments. So there's an area where they could write in comments on there. So there's, the 47 people that signed it, which was in our supplemental information. A couple of those comments, much appreciated. Family will utilize it. One of them said, I'm a farmer. I enjoy seeing people at the shelter. So here, you can see he's already seeing that people have been stopping and using the shelter throughout the duration. Very nice family gathering. Nice to have in the area. Nice place for the community to gather. So these are just a few of the comments that were on the petition that we circulated. So transitioning into, the importance of why we're here, and there's basically, 6 criteria that if we meet those 6 criteria for the special exception, it's Indiana law that the special exception needs to be approved, that it needs to be allowed to go forward. So we're going to walk through each of those and kind of demonstrate how we believe we're meeting those, which some, obviously will be up for debate, but, that's the key here is that it clearly states that there's no option other than to approve the special exception petition if these 6 criteria are met. So criteria number 1, the establishment, maintenance, or operation of the special exception will not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, and general welfare. In the staff report, it states that the approval of this special exception is unlikely to be detrimental to the public health and public safety of the community. It goes on into further detail. It's a small public park. It's for the public benefit and for their general welfare. It's not going to be detrimental towards it. The AP staff report does, however, state that the approval of the public shelter is very likely to be detrimental to the general welfare. The basis for that argument that it goes through in the staff report is that approving a public park would allow a ban on CFOs in the future. First off, we're not here discussing a CFO with this application. This would assume that a CFO that also requires a special exception rates higher as a special exception than a park would, or some other special exception that we could be asking for. That's not the case in your zoning ordinance or in state law, that there's anything that makes one of special exception more important than the other one. All we can do is look to the code, the regulations, the ordinances, and try to follow them. That's what we want to try to do here. This, if that was the intent of the Fayette County ordinances, if their intent was to not allow a public park to go in this area, there was ample opportunity for there to be additions to the ordinances, to the CFO ordinance, that they could have banned a public park in any A1 area. They also could have only grandfathered current parks. They could have said the park had to be greater than 5 acres, greater than 10 acres, greater than 20 acres. They could have done any one of those options when the CFO ordinance was presented, but they didn't. They said any area for public gathering in there. They also could have, the special exception for public parks could have just been removed. None of those things occurred, however. Second item, the special exception will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity of the purpose already permitted, nor substantially diminish and impair property values within the neighborhood. The APC staff report acknowledges that the special exception will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of the other properties in the immediate vicinity for the purposes already permitted. That's the critical word within this phrase. Nor substantially diminish and impair property values within the neighborhood. The remonstrators are likely to argue that a CFO is considered a permitted use. However, if that was the case, they wouldn't have to come forward for a special exception. Unfortunately, to build a CFO here, they do have to come forward for it. It's not permitted. It has to get a special exception. There's actually case law already in Indiana stating that speaks to this, and that's the SNS Enterprises Incorporated versus Marion County Board of Zoning Appeals. A special exception is a use permitted under the zoning ordinance upon the showing of certain statutory criteria. Until those are proven, it's not a permitted use. Anybody in the vicinity can continue to use it. The ground around it can continue to be farmed. Everything that's being done today can continue to be done. Item 3, the establishment of the special exception will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of surrounding property for uses permitted in the district. The APC staff report acknowledges that the establishment of the special exception will not impede normal and orderly development and improvement of surrounding property for uses permitted. Again, permitted is a key part to this. I think, the reality is this is a small project that is serving public good at no charge. It's a resource for the public consumption. It will not adversely impact the agricultural nature or development of the surrounding properties for the uses currently permitted. Opposition will attempt to make this about the potential future development of other special exceptions. That doesn't weigh into this. That's not part of what can be considered under the statutes. Per the previous case law that I already pointed out, special exceptions are not permitted until they prove they meet the criteria set forth in the zoning ordinance. Adequate utilities, access roads, and other necessary facilities have been or are being provided. The APC staff again acknowledges that there are small inadequacies that could easily be rectified as a condition of the approval of the BZA. The only potential inadequacy would be the addition of the drainage culvert under the driveway if required by Rush County Highway, who actually controls that road. We're here to say that if further improvements are warranted, we'd be more than glad to put in that drainage culvert. We will work with the Rush County Highway upon approval. It can be a condition of the approval, and we will work with them to make sure that that is rectified. Per the staff report, it should be easily done if needed. Adequate measures have been or will be taken to provide ingress or egress to design as to minimize traffic congestion in the public streets. Again, this was noted that there is a minor discrepancy, but also in the staff report, that it's easily rectified. The requirement is that it needs to be 24 foot wide for the drive. It's currently just narrow of that. The applicant is more than willing to widen that driveway to 24 feet, should it be deemed necessary as a condition of the approval. We would concede to that and be happy to do so. So that's the first 5 that are pretty clear cut that we meet all of the requirements of those exceptions. The 5th one, which is what's in the staff report and probably be discussed the most, is that the establishment, maintenance, or operation of the special exception will not contravene the principles of reinvestment, revitalization, and the avoidance of unintended consequences as set forth in the Fayette County Comprehensive Plan. This one's a little bit tougher because it is gray. I mean, this isn't as clear cut. It's not as black and white as the others, but there's some key things that we can look to. The creation of such public amenity will serve the public good and work in harmony with both the letter and the spirit of the Fayette County Comprehensive Plan. The public park shelter is already being used by the public. It's being enjoyed. It's already been proven that there is public support around it by the people that actually live there. There will be opposition tonight, I'm sure, for other reasons that are against it, but it is being supported by the people that actually are using it and live in the vicinity of it. The comprehensive plan also comments on the benefits of public parks, but also expresses a concern for the lack of funds to properly maintain them. In that comprehensive plan, they acknowledge that there's a need for parks, there's a need for public gathering, there is that, but there's not the money to pay for it. You have before you tonight the potential to give something back to the community at no cost to Fayette County. This is something that will be funded solely by the applicants and for the use of everybody. There can't be a better scenario to meet that comprehensive plan than meeting a need that's stated in there at no cost to the county. The APC staff report states that approval of the special exception will have unintended consequences, however, because it does also, in the comprehensive plan, note the need for agricultural growth and for the ability for development of that. That's clearly stated in there. However, if the county did not intend to allow public parks in an area where a potential, there is no approval for a CFO in this vicinity, it would have to go through a special exception. But if they were to, for a potential CFO could be built, then they could abandon a park in an A1 area. The zoning ordinance allows this to go in. It's not a ban, it's a special exception. They had more than enough opportunities to put regulations in place per the notes from staff. They spent years working on that. And they could have easily added that as a barrier to that if they so chose. The question is, how can you use an unintended if the zoning ordinance allows it? This is something that's allowed in there. It can't be unintended if your own ordinances allow it to be done, if it can be a special exception. In closing, it's been stated several times throughout different communications that if the intent of the Area Plan Commission and the Board of Commissioners was to ban new confined feeding operations from Fayette County, the ordinance would have explicitly banned confined feeding operations. It doesn't. They went through a whole process to create the ordinances for it. However, the opposite could be said here. If the intent of the Area Plan Commission and the Board of Commissioners was to ban new public parks from Fayette County, then the ordinance would have explicitly banned public parks anywhere where a CFO could be built. The ordinance nowhere say that, so it can't be something that's allowed to go forward. With that concludes the presentation. I'd be more than glad to answer any questions about what the special exception we're asking for or anything else related to it.
Who wants to start first?
I would just want to know, with adequate access to roads, I travel 850 West every single day, and it's very difficult for two vehicles to go down 850, especially this time of year when semis are going down 850. There are 3 grain elevators that sit within 5 miles of there, and I drive a very tiny car, so it is quite difficult to go down. With a public park there, do you have any concerns that, in the event of a gathering going on during harvest time, that there could be, a major traffic situation on 850 near that intersection, which would take, if there were an accident, would be 20 minutes before somebody could respond to a major semi-accident? Because I've seen it. I've seen in Falmouth it take 20 minutes for somebody to respond from Raleigh or Mays or wherever.
Understandable. With the size of it, I think it was stated in the staff report. It's not intended, the thought is that there's probably not going to be 100 cars parked there in a huge gathering. It's intended for a family to get together, no more than would be coming out of my parents' driveway when we had a family get together, or any of the neighbors along that street. It's just an area to be able to go and enjoy in there. So whereas there's the potential for that, no more than a personal residence would have.
I have questions about the adequate utilities. What kind of facilities do you have for bathroom and water?
So there isn't, again, with the nature of what it is, and I think this was in the staff report from Bill, there's trash cans there, there's receptacles there, which my father empties. There's not water. The thought is it's a picnic shelter where they would bring their own food and be able to sit down and enjoy. It's not intended that they'll be there for 8 or 9 hours at a time, probably. If we see that it was a problem, and he noted that, the potential to add a portable toilet or something if the need starts to present itself, or that if the durations start to extend out for that time period, we'd be open to looking at putting a portable toilet out there as needed. No water supplied though.
That was a concern of mine, is that there is not adequate utilities. No electric whatsoever.
If there's no electric, there isn't any, within the codes or the regulations, there's no requirements that you have to have electricity or running water at a facility. The restroom would be a nice to, if it proves to be a problem, that if there is an issue there, that we would look to add those utilities.
But if you brought kids there, what is there to do? I
Um,
mean, if I stopped and they'd say, what are we stopping here for? There ain't nothing else to play with.
So
Hell, I'm gonna keep busy running through the fields.
there's
know.
a chance that they could be in the immediate area right there next to the ground on my parents' property. It's being used today. There's probably, for a while, Dad was keeping track of, just people that would stop in there. And there's people that stop and have lunch. Will be there. There have been families in the evening. There will be refuse, trash containers in there. So it is a picnic area. It's a place for them to stop and have dinner or whatever. People that work in the vicinity will stop in there and eat their lunch on occasion as they're going through. But then we've seen, moms with their kids there having a picnic, eating dinner or eating lunch.
So this isn't like I can't rent the picnic space. Right?
No,
Am I
it's not.
understanding?
It's a nonprofit
I can't
only
call
for
you
the
up and
benefit.
say, I want to rent it out for the day.
No,
And
it's not intended for that. It's just open to the public for anybody that would like to stop in.
Okay, if somebody get hurt out there, who's taking care of that?
It's on us. It's on my parents' property, and they'll have to carry the proper insurance if somebody gets hurt.
Couple of questions, actually I have several. One, you said you asked attorneys if you needed a special exception.
Yeah,
Before you did
initially
this.
we were working with Kurt, who's here tonight, and I'll probably get the name wrong, I think reached out to Mr. Smith here locally when we couldn't get a hold of staff. They reached out on our behalf and was initially, through phone conversation, led to believe that we did not need a special exception.
Did anyone reach out to Bill?
Yes, that's who he spoke with.
Well, my first conversation with it was that after it was built, I was informed it was built, and then I didn't actually hear from any attorney with it until I had that first
So you
communication
didn't
from
reach
Mr.
out to
Johnson.
Bill before you built
You
it?
never had no permit.
I'll let Kurt
If I may.
handle this on our behalf, I'll let him speak to that.
So, the chronology of it was, I spoke with Mr. and Mrs. Bills about this project. I reached out to Mr. Smith, and his first name's escaping me. I wanna say,
Gary.
thank you, Gary. Cause I had heard that he had some expertise in this area, and so I asked him. Cause at that point, I had attempted, I think, to contact you to get a copy of the ordinances.
Well, that was a really, really bad time for me.
And I'm not here to cast stones, I'm trying to explain, answer this gentleman's questions.
That was before you built it?
Yes, sir. And then, in speaking with Mr. Smith, what I think there was a disconnect, frankly, in that when he told me that there was no special exception or governmental approval needed, what I think he, in hindsight, was referring to was a building permit because of the size, right? So if it's under, and I don't remember all the specs, but
It's
basically.
150 square feet if it's a residential structure.
If it's under a certain size, then you don't need a permit, and I think, that's the wire that got crossed.
And when was it built? What was the date approximately? I know you can't give me, it's not a single date.
It's in the
but time
report, I
order.
believe, or
I understand.
May 3rd.
Of what year?
this year.
Which one it was completed?
Yeah,
When was it started?
it was built within a week period.
Yeah.
Around May 3rd, give or take.
That week.
3 days either way, it was built in that week.
So it could have been the first of May.
And again, we, after it was done, I sent, a letter, to the office, sort of saying, hey, this is it, if you need to publicize it, or, sort of just verifying that everything was copacetic. And then I didn't get communication, and I think I ended up
Yeah,
calling.
you ended up calling me about
And
that.
then once I called him, I was able, I think there was somebody who comes and answers your phone maybe a couple days a week, and I spoke to that lady. And ultimately, that led to the conversation starting where you said, hey, whoa, yeah, you do need a special exception. And I think it was probably within a week of that conversation that we filed.
Then your neighbor comments, make sure I see it all. They all June, same month of June.
It was
Looks like they're all June, I can't read your writing.
It was basically one day, it was Sunday, whatever the date is, there's a date on there.
Yeah, I'm assuming they're all June then. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds right, that was all.
I just can't read some of them. Some are like forward, that's why I'm making sure. So they're all June.
It looks like June 30th, if I can, it's kind of hard to
Yeah,
read,
that's
but
what
it
it
looks
looks
like
like to me.
like.
After you went around, after you built the building, you went around to check the neighbors.
Correct. As part of our submittal process, we went through.
I'm just
Once we found out we
established.
needed to
Right.
submit it, we went through to get community support.
And then you say you're gonna maintain it. What happens when you're unable? Does it fall back on county hands? Is that something, I mean, I'm just asking a futuristic question.
No.
It's private, it's privately held, it's privately owned, so it's on them, and then
So it
to
just
the
goes
extent,
away, or?
to the extent that, well, I think that you guys, through this process, can put limitations on it.
Correct. So, I mean, it's a public property, as with any special exception which your ordinance allow for. If at any point it stops being used for that, you lose your special exception. So it's not like it would be grandfathered. It's the intent of my parents for as long as they're capable, and they plan to retire and live there, to have it on their property, at which point I would probably have to decide what to do with it at some point in the future.
Well, and I can tell
That's why I'm
you
asking.
that there's been a conversation about creating a trust that might be self-perpetuating, and so, you know, the ideas that you're raising, this isn't the first time we've thought about it.
It's understood. Need to ask.
Yeah.
And so, before this year, you didn't have any activity, in building activity at all in that area where that shelter is,
No,
before this year?
nothing to do with the shelter there. They've lived there the entire time, but nothing to do with this permitted exception. Special exception.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman. You said that you built it under the assumption that you didn't need any permits or special exceptions. You later found out after it was built that it did require a special exception. And you went on and backdoored and undermined the ordinance, or our ordinance requiring a special exception, by leaving it open to the public all summer.
So I believe per the ordinance, we were never served with a notice of violation or asked to remove it or take it down. Per the ordinance, per your ordinances, and I can't speak them verbatim, but there's a requirement if one goes in without, that you then are allowed the opportunity to remedy it by submitting a special exception, which, like was stated, I believe we did within a week of being notified by Mr. McDaniel that it was needed. So we took those immediately actions for it. We were never served, which is required per the ordinances, like, I don't know if it's called a cease and desist, but a violation notice that would require us to take it down. Since the county never served it to us, we assumed that it was okay to leave it open during the special exception process.
But don't you think it would have been a good idea to put a chain across it and not advertise it as a public park until you had the special exception?
If I thought the county.
Morally
thought so.
and
If I thought the county thought that, I assume they would have sent us the notice requirement for it.
Mr. Mills, question for you. I know there's a staked off fence area around the picnic area on the north side of the property, but your special exceptions for the entire 10 acres of property?
No, what we would do is, on that plat of survey, we actually show an area of the 10 acres that would be partitioned off into its own parcel that would actually be on here. It's larger than that area, I think it was around an acre, I can't remember. But we would split that parcel upon approval of the special exception. That would be its own parcel there that it sits on.
No question for you. Is that required prior to
Do what now?
split the parcel? Are they required to do that prior to a special exception? Because they're asking for the 10 acres. The application is for the 10-acre parcel that they have.
Well, we don't
for
have a
special
requirement
exception.
whether it be
Before or
during,
after?
or some people, provided they then get a special exception, then they will split the land. That's frequently what will happen. So, yeah, we don't have a requirement that has to be split before the project. Well, if it's contingent.
You could later on have corn around there and you couldn't see much about it. Could you? I mean, you're just not gonna have this green grass here. you're gonna have corn in the field once in a while, soybeans, different
I'm
things?
not in that field. That's been a pasture there since, I don't know about before my parents bought it, but for the last 35 years or however long, 30 plus years.
So you don't plant nothing there?
Nothing's planted in that area. It's been a green area of pasture that entire time. There was a time period where there were homes out in it years ago, back when we raised homes.
How do you plan on preventing the general public to wander onto adjacent properties and keep them from trespassing?
So no different than any public space or anything. I mean, neighbors could post no trespassing signs. We could post no trespassing between that parcel and another parcel. And basically have signs, making sure that they know. That's why it is a roped off area, so they know the boundaries that they should be in there. No different than if anybody trespasses on anybody's property though, the sheriff could be called, the police can be brought into that. There's nothing keeping somebody from parking along the road there in any gravel drive and wandering onto somebody's property.
I'm not as worried about the trespassing part as the health and welfare. Because the adjacent property owner has several hundred acres there that could be in standing corn in the middle of summer, and a 4-year-old easily wander off into that cornfield. And how long will they last in a cornfield at 90 degrees?
I mean, I can't speak to how long somebody can survive in a cornfield in
I-
that heat, but that's why there is a roped off area delineating to make sure.
But it doesn't stop a child from
Well, it
wandering.
won't stop a grown-up if they've been drinking or something either.
Or even.
I'm just telling you the way I feel about it. It's scary. I would be scared to have a place like that.
I'd be afraid to have the responsibility.
Because you've got drugs, you've got dope, you've got all that stuff. I'd be scared of it. Now, I really would. I mean, I'm white and gray-headed, but I just gotta be scared of it. Because I'm thinking the same thing.
The uses we've seen it used for today, we have little concern. It's families,
Well, I'm
and
sure
somebody
you
stopping
do.
by at lunch.
Or you
That's not to
wouldn't be
say-
here tonight.
That's right. Like if we'd seen some people in there drinking, if we'd seen people in there, we'd maybe change our mind, but we haven't seen any kind of that activity. The same could be said for any public park. Somebody could wander off of it, somebody could drink, somebody could do that. That doesn't mean the nation should get rid of all public parks.
No, I'm not saying that.
That's the reality that we have to have some faith in the people that are gonna be coming to visit these.
Is your intent to leave it gravel?
In the drive in the parking area there, that's correct. Grass in the area surrounding it.
If you're assuming that you reparcel, favorable and unfavorable, and you reparcel that, where would parking be? Are you just doing the area that's roped out and?
It's that gravel area, is the parking area today. Again, the intent is for just a few cars there at a time, is the thought, and that's what it's been used for to date.
And you got one table?
Yeah, there's a one table there, and a trash container.
Do you have a chance to have a record of how many people have been there, who's been there, and when they've been there? Have you kept a record of this?
So what I'd say is for the first month or so, he kept an eye down there or whatever. At some point, I told him he needed to stop watching everybody that came in and out, so stopped monitoring it quite so close. But the reality is, I mean, it's fairly routine that somebody stops in, but I can't give you an exact date. In that first 30 days, I think, that we had, I mean, there was probably, I'm gonna guess on our list, between 18 and 23 or so people that had stopped in during that time, groups of people or whatever on that list would be my best guess, and I can't speak to the frequency or the exact numbers. So there was somebody there just as soon as, within the last week, I know, I was talking to them, said somebody was down there that evening having a dinner or something.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everybody, I appreciate it.
Is there anyone now who would like to speak in remonstrance?
Yes, sir.
Evening. Jeff Rucker, attorney for the Dora family. I'm just going to jump right into the special use criteria if I can. The first one being the establishment, maintenance, or operation of the special exception will not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, or general welfare. So I think as Bill's got a cold he's chasing right now, his staff report said it best. This will be detrimental to the general welfare of Fayette County as it pertains to Fayette County policy concerning the future of agriculture in Fayette County. A single confined feeding operation in this region of the state has annual sales of $2.76 million and generates $500,000 of income and creates 24 jobs. Those 24 jobs are an impact to the community. That's per the Indiana Business Research Center and the Kelley School of Business at IU. The annual impact of an average CFO is estimated to be $2 million, just under $1,951,000, again, per the Kelley School of Business at IU. In addition to the impacts on the general impact on agriculture in the county of Fayette, this site does pose dangers to the community. I think Ms. Seiler indicated she had some fears. Another fear that you have is that this is not an ADA compliant site. You guys went through great expense in this county to have a study done to bring your community into compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. That act has specific requirements and virtually all of them are not met by this. Doesn't have a solid surface. Doesn't have less than a 1/4 inch grade change. Doesn't have a handicapped accessible table. Doesn't have a handicapped accessible parking space. Doesn't have a van accessible parking space. Those people that are handicapped in the county of Fayette also are part of this community, and their needs not only matter, they are federally mandated. None of that is met, none of that was discussed. Section 153.34 B1B, not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity for the purposes permitted or substantially diminish or impair property values within the neighborhood. This application, I think, should come as no surprise to anyone who has filed for one purpose only, and it's not parks. The surprise ending here is it's filed to stop the Dora confined feeding operation, which was filed a couple months before this was ever built. So, as is common in these situations, neighbors can be upset by those things, and the Bills filed 2 or 3 letters with the IDEM, with the Indiana Department of Environmental Management, indicating their displeasure with the Dora application. When they saw they would get no relief that way, they immediately built a shelter. This thing was built for one purpose only, and it will be there as long as that purpose is successful. The shelter was built, as Mr. Bills said, May 3rd. That's 2 months after the Bills were given notice of our filing on February 28th of 2019. They were provided specific notice on March 1st of 2019 and on April 10th of 2019. So, surprisingly, 3 weeks later, a shelter popped up overnight. So that's a pretty surprising coincidence. This idea of this park, I've heard it called 2 or 3 things tonight. I don't think this exact thing exists specifically in your ordinances. I saw in the application, the Bills indicated that this is a public recreational facility because the public's allowed to come there. Well, in that situation, that means Walmart is a public recreation facility, Burger King is a public recreation facility, anywhere that people can go as the public. That's not what your ordinance, I believe, is intending. The ordinance is not intending that just because I say the public can go somewhere makes it a park. Every business in this town, including the folks that have their gas station in front of us, is a place of public accommodation. They're bringing people in for business. That doesn't mean they're a park. That doesn't mean they're a public recreation facility. I didn't hear anything about recreation in the application's testimony. What's important about this in terms of impact and impairment of property values, I just told you about the numbers. This particular place, like a pebble in a water, creates a 1 mile dead zone where animal agriculture in the form of CFOs will forever be barred. That's 2,000 acres of dead space that can no longer be used for this purpose. I think Bill did a great job in his staff report pointing out how restrictive your ordinances were created over that 4-year process. If it was anything like the one we went through in Bartholomew County, it was filled with raised voices and hurt feelings. And everybody had a voice and a say and an opinion, and they didn't all get along during that. But you came up with an ordinance. It's the most restrictive I've seen, and I've seen a lot of them. And it has very little, if you looked at those maps that Bill included with his staff report, there's very little land in this county that you can put a confined feeding operation on. That may be fine by most people. I'm sure that that was the intent, to make it, put it in places where it could be put, where it wasn't going to harm people, where it wasn't going to create any more hurt feelings and ruffled feathers than it needed to. This is one of those few places. So to put another pebble in the water and create another 2,000 acres of valuable agricultural land that can never be made more valuable is a harm. The establishment, maintenance, or operation will not contravene the principles of reinvestment, revitalization, and avoidance of unintended consequences in Fayette County. This is the one that Bill spoke to in his staff report at length. We obviously agree with those points. I think principal amongst them is the fact that we're giving a private citizen the ability to unwind 4 years of legislative work in Fayette County creating the rules. We're giving a private citizen the ability to step aside and step over the comprehensive plan, to walk through our zoning ordinance and administratively, unilaterally change the rules that apply to land. I wasn't here when those rules were written, but I can't imagine that was something that was intended. As I said, it stops 2,000 acres being used for a CFO, and give or take 3 days according to the bills, a week's time will stop every other one in the future. It wouldn't take very many park shelters to stop any animal agriculture from ever being inside the walls of Fayette County again. And that deals a damaging blow in jobs, in tax revenues, in feed purchased, in services purchased. Those are all things that are an impact not only to the Dura family, but to Fayette County in general. Your comprehensive plan on page 55 says, in order to protect our rural heritage, farmers should be allowed more opportunities to generate income from their land with agricultural related businesses. That's what we're trying to do. And that's what this is almost expressly trying to stop. In addition, your comprehensive plan says, how much of an effect will rural development have on a local farmer's ability to adopt more intensive agricultural practices in the future? I can't imagine that anything else was meant but what we're trying to do. What other intensive agricultural process could that mean? We're talking about animal agriculture, and this is talking about stopping it. Your comprehensive plan also says, it asks the question, and it doesn't purport to have an answer to it at the time, what is happening to farmland? This is what's happening to farmland. Subdivisions are moving in, homes are moving in, and when the combines run in a cornfield, the kids at the swimming pool get upset that the chaff gets in there. This is another example of a different variety, of bluntly a very clever variety of means of stopping that agriculture. As you might imagine, those maps that Bill provided everyone in his report, those are 12, I think, years old. Every house that's been built since then, every church that's been opened since then, every park that's happened since then, every expansion of any of your hamlets or towns, that has intensified those areas that cannot be used for animal agriculture in the future. Every time a person builds a home, it creates a bubble of a quarter mile in every direction that you can't have, 1,620 feet that you can't have animal agriculture. Every time a group of well-meaning citizens open a church of their faith, it creates a 1 mile another 2,000 acres that can't be used. So if we allow this to move forward and be approved, I think we can all see the writing on the wall. There were some good questions about what was required. Mr. McDaniels and I have a difference of opinion on whether or not this shelter was required to get a design release permit from the state of Indiana. We had an architect write us a letter that read us what the rules were. And the difference of opinion we have is the use of the term picnic shelter. Well, the picnic shelter in the statute is given as an example of a type of personnel shelter. It says personnel shelters like picnic structures, bus stops, and I think there was one other example. This is where one of your local community businesses decides to put a little rooftop canopy outside so their smokers can get outside and not get wet. We're not talking about every structure. We're not talking about the neighbor's gazebo. We're not talking about those things. We're talking about personnel structures, not personal structures. So they were required to get a design release permit. They did not do that. They were then required to get an improvement location permit. They did not do that. And all of those things would have been hinged upon this group and the group sitting in these chairs later on tonight saying that they could. Because they're not allowed to pull an ILP and get a building permit until your group and the group after you has blessed their activity. This is a cart that's well before the horse. As I said, this violates the Americans with Disability federal law. It violates your local ordinance, which speaks to that. And you specifically talk in your ADA transition plan, section 3.3, page 24, any new construction or renovations for facilities that provide public services will be done in accordance with the current ADA regulations. This has none of those. None, not one. Does not provide van accessible spaces, does not provide stable surfaces that are slip resistant, does not provide a shelter that has an access route to it that's stable, firm, and slip resistant. That means pavement. It does not have changes in grade of less than 1/4 of an inch. Hard to do that with gravel. There's no accessible routes. There's no sufficient space for a van space. And wrapping all these things is Indiana state law. And Indiana state law has two provisions that I think are important for you all to keep in mind. And they apply to literally every law in the state of Indiana. The first of those is the Right to Farm Act. The General Assembly declares that it is the policy of the state to conserve, protect, and encourage the development and improvement of its agricultural land for the production of food and other agricultural products. The General Assembly finds that when non-agricultural land uses extend into agricultural areas, agricultural operations often become the subject of nuisance suits. As a result, agricultural operations are sometimes forced to cease operations, and many persons may be discouraged from making investments in farm improvements. It's the purpose of this section to reduce the loss to the state of its agricultural resources by limiting the circumstances under which agricultural operations are deemed a nuisance. The second of those provisions is called the Agricultural Canon. The General Assembly declares that it is the policy of the state to conserve, protect, and encourage the development and improvement of agriculture, agriculture businesses, and agricultural land for the production of food, fuel, fiber, and other agricultural products. The Indiana Code, let me pause there, the Indiana Code, every law in our state, shall be construed to protect the rights of farmers to choose among all generally accepted farming and livestock production practices, including the use of ever-changing technology. This is the case. This is what we're talking about. This is why those laws were enacted, because this isn't the only place these things are happening. It's happening all around the state, and every time a challenge is faced, it's like a mutual arms race, right? The people that don't like bacon build a better machine to try to take down the bacon industry. Every time the chickens move in, people get smarter on how to fight chickens. So that's come to come to roost in Fayette County on your doorstep to deal with it now. Mr. Bills made an interesting statement at the end. He said, you folks have the right to put conditions on any approval. Well, if you're of a mind to approve this, and I hope you're not, why don't we put a condition on it that says that they can have their park as long as they can't use its park status to defeat a CFO sighting. If we really want a park, they can have a park. And if we really want a hog farm, and you folks see fit to approve it, then we can have a hog farm and everybody can live in harmony. Thank you.
Lisa, come up here, please. Sign in there.
My name's Lisa King. My husband and I live about a quarter-mile north of this area, and I represent myself and Sharon Cooper, who owns land directly beside this and right next to me. Mr. Bills has been a good neighbor, and we don't have any problem living in an agriculture area. I think when you look at this petition, and I've been on your side over there, okay? So when you look at this petition, what you have to think about is this petition. As the gentleman prior to me spoke, he spoke about the hog farm and the CFO and those things. That application had not been made when Mr. Bills built his building or when his application was made. Now you may put whatever limitations you want on it, but you have to let this petition stand independently and block your mind that there's a CFO petition. Because the CFO petition was not in front of you when that application was made. At that time, the CFO was still at IDM. In February, it went to IDM. He had not come to Fayette County and made application for a special exception. Now, when you get to his special exception, you can set whatever you want there. If you look at traffic, Brian,
Yes, ma'am.
traffic on county line, I tell you what, you guys set some sheriffs out there, you can make some money. All you gotta do is set them right in front of my house, because there's a little dip, and they catch them going 70 miles an hour. Traffic is busy out there. But there's also a lot of semis, and a CFO is gonna add the semis. So you gotta kind of spread things out. Mrs. Seiler brought up, cornfields and children. We in America are taking everybody else's responsibility on ourselves. Yes, I would be concerned too. I have small children, grandchildren that they think this is a great thing. They love to go down there. We've seen motorcycles down there where they stop and eat. So we in the community aren't against expanding farming, but we're also not against his petition to have a park area, to have a picnic area. It's his land. Let's look at that petition and consider his petition. You've just got to set your mind off of it. The other one wasn't here yet. You can only do one thing.
Still not here.
So that's what I want to say. None of our neighbors are against it. We're all in favor of it. We enjoy it. We enjoy the neighborhood. And, you've got a lot of other things going on there. You've got that wind farm fight, you got this fight, you got that fight. Everybody's gonna always be against something. So let's try to do what's best for the community and the people that are living there now.
Hello, my name is John Bossingham. I live approximately a half mile from the recreation area. I just want to speak real quick in favor of it. I've taken my family, my two little girls there several times, and we think it's a great addition to our community. There's not a whole lot out there for kids, for families to take care of themselves and enjoy themselves. So I just wanted to speak in favor of this, and That's all I have to say.
All right, well, glad to get back up and talk. You know, Mr. Rocker brought up several points that I'd like to discuss. You know, the thing is, pretty much everything he brought up, and Lisa already hit on it when she got up here and spoke. Unless I missed a meeting, there's not an approved CFO in the area. There's not. There's not even a complete application that's been submitted for one yet. You can't take that into consideration when looking at this. Each application has to stand on its own. You have to be able to evaluate whether it meets the 6 criteria as it sits there today. He's talking about potential revenues for another family to make. He's talking about potential things that could come if it's approved. But unless I missed a meeting, there's been no special exception approved yet for that. So all of those facts have nothing to do with the 6 items. He can bring them up, he can try to change your mind or get the facts confused with what we're here to talk about today, but none of those relate to what we're actually here tonight to hear. He brought up, again, the ADA. He brought up other things. Again, the staff's already weighed in on that, and it's not. I actually work with and for a civil engineering architecture firm. We've reviewed it. I believe the application stands as is not needed for that. For those things, again, that's not his place to decide. Running down through, again, all of these arguments are about the CFO and if it's approved and if it gets put in. So there's really not much point to talk to most of them. When there is no facts that actually speak against that, you have to reach for things that aren't related to it. He's talking about stopping 2,000 acres. Again, nothing's approved yet. That would require a special exception just like this. Until it's approved, it's not permitted. Any of those facts aren't relevant in this case. He talks about the comprehensive plan and you know, chose a couple really good sentences out of there that make his case again for a CFO and for the future of that. There's also the wording in there about the need for the public parks and the ability that the county doesn't have to pay for them and that those are needed in there. Those same things could be pulled out and said. Again, he's thinking about something that's not even permitted yet. Nothing relevant to this case. Shouldn't be considered as part of it. He then also goes into a Right to Farm Act and the canon. The Right to Farm Act is there, again, not relevant in this case because the Right to Farm Act is there to protect against negligent lawsuits against operations already in place by the public moving into those areas. Things like he said, people move in, they put a house next to it where a hog barn already was, and then they get upset about it and they bring a lawsuit. That's not the case. There's no hog barn anywhere near here. There's no CFO, not even one that's permitted currently in that area. So even though he brought up some interesting things, they're not really relevant to the case at hand here tonight. Maybe they're things that could be discussed in a few weeks if there's ever a complete application submitted, but they're not relevant here tonight. With that, I'd be glad to answer any other question that maybe came up. Otherwise, I'll turn it over.
Can I ask a question more than just the?
Let's get the public hearing done and then
Thank you.
there'll be questions from this side. Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
So I think we're ready to close the public hearing and
Okay, and I strongly suggest that have the board member, ask the board member to discuss each criteria to make clear their thinking on them.
we can do that before.
Yep.
But we will declare the public hearing portion of this
Yes.
item closed. Then open the floor. Chad, if you had a question.
I did have a question. I'm not gonna ask several people, okay? I got several questions I want to establish. What was the date that the Doors submitted the application to, was it IDEM?
It was February 28th, 2019.
And
When was it
February 28th,
approved?
2019. And then you mentioned that there was a couple letters sent from the bills to IDEM.
That's correct.
What was the date of those?
I don't have they were in my packet, but I don't have those. They were in, I believe, March and April.
Do you have an answer to that? Do you know when it was?
I don't remember what they
Sir, do you remember when you sent those? March and April? And so you started construction on May 3rd after that? Finished it on May 3rd. And what was the response from IDEM to you on their letters, what were you asking IDEM for?
We were concerned about water quality, about water quality of wells.
For what reason?
Runoff water
Of
of the fields around us, or the mineral would be applied
a CAFO?
of a CAFO.
So that it is relevant. I know they haven't permitted or asked for a permit yet, but it is relevant because IDEM was notified and sent, either they haven't applied, and he knew about it, he sent a letter. I'm establishing a timeline, and there it is knowledge. I understand they haven't submitted one yet, but it's relevant. So I'm not saying it's not irrelevant. It's relevant to me because there's knowledge of it. That makes it relevant, in my opinion. And then secondly, I work with Bill a lot, okay? Bill, do I ever do anything without a permit?
Nope.
Why do I do that?
Because you're nice to me. Because it's required.
I'm gonna have to fix this.
It's required.
No, I'm a business guy, and I understand if I don't do a permit, I got there's repercussions to that, and a lawyer I would think would understand that. Just because you asked another lawyer who you didn't really have any knowledge of, I know Gary, but you said you didn't really know him. Why would you trust his opinion over waiting for? I know Bill didn't get back to you, but as a lawyer, you're very analytical and you're very timeline, you're very ordered, and things have to happen a certain way.
Mr. Smith has the same facility on his property. He indicated that he did not get a special exception when he had it done, and I relied upon his
I
representation.
understand that, but that doesn't make it right.
When you're not getting a response, I was trying to solve the issue.
I understand that, but as a lawyer, I would go to the person who could actually answer the question.
So long as
If
they
I go
answer
to
the
it-
question, you are correct.
I understand that. Doesn't mean he wasn't gonna get back to you, which, that's a different issue, totally different. But there was knowledge of it, so my question is, why, and my wife, we have 4 kids, and my wife she used to go to there goes my grammar again. She used to go to all sorts of picnic shelters. There was always something there, a nature preserve, a pond, woods. I don't see a reason to have a picnic shelter here to go to. That's why I'm asking, why would you construct it?
It's currently being used. You heard the neighbors.
That's not what I
get up
asked.
and speak.
I asked why. Because he had knowledge of the CAFO before. He admitted the reason was for water quality. Why did you construct this without a permit?
So my question back would be, why isn't?
Sir, I asked him.
I'm allowed to speak on his behalf. He's given me power of attorney.
Okay.
What I'd say is, I would ask in return is, where does the ordinances or the 6 items that we have to prove tonight speak to intent?
I'm trying to
Do we have
establish
to-
that.
But it's not relevant to the ordinances.
But you're saying the CAFO's irrelevant, and I'm trying to show I'm not trying to show, I'm letting those facts speak for themselves. The intent was to stop the CAFO. So my next question would be, if we were to grant this, would you be okay allowing the CAFO to still go in under special exemption?
The answer is no. We would ask that you follow your ordinances, all that we would ask.
I don't think the ordinance would allow it.
If we asked for a special exemption from the ordinance, it would allow it, correct?
Potentially.
Okay,
You would essentially be amending your ordinance.
I'm asking a legal question, and the answer was
Conditions on
yes.
approval.
You're allowed to put conditions where
We're allowed to have conditions.
Conditions, that's the word I was looking
So-
for, I apologize, wrong word. So if we were to grant this, allowing conditions for CAFO, would you accept it?
The answer
I'm
is
sorry.
no. We've applied for it as it stands, per the ordinances.
So the
as
intent
is.
was to shut down the CAFO.
Again, sir, I'm not sure. I've stated on the record where intent is applicable to your ordinances.
I'm doing intent based on timeline of facts. I can't judge your motive, that's why I asked why, you won't answer that question. When someone won't answer my question, they pretty well answer the question. But the intent of the facts, the timeline pretty well states the reasoning behind. I don't ever build anything because I won't get in trouble. I always get permits. And I'm not legal, I'm not a lawyer.
Well, I guess what I would say to you, sir, is, we're not here to sell you the stars and the moon, okay? It would be disingenuous, I think, to say that aspect of things did not feed into this. But I think the bigger picture is, what are we doing here? this is a public resource being offered to this community at no cost.
Yes,
And-
it is
and
a
so,
cost.
You know,
Yes.
whether or not he did it because he thought the Russians were invading, or the man from the moon told him to, you know, he,
Nope, that's not accurate. He had knowledge of an intent from the doors. That's not Russia invading on a hypothetical. He knew what was happening.
and we're not here to dispute that. What I'm saying is that I don't know how that impacts whether or not this is a good thing for the community. It's criteria that we've done.
You know, if someone comes to me, maybe had prior knowledge, and they ask us, that's one thing, but to build it, and it's kind of slap in the face to me, because I follow the rules. I have to follow the rules. I'm not going to, I don't want to, I stand accountable to higher authority and don't want to break those rules, because I will stand in judgment of that. But I also have to stand accountable to every citizen here. If I break the rules, then I should pay. It's not right. And to me, it looks like, again, I can't judge motive, but based on not answering the questions, it was built purely because he had prior knowledge and the establishment of the timeline to stop the CAFO. And I don't think that's right. And if it would have came before you built it and asked, might be a different situation. But to build it and ask for forgiveness later, I don't agree with that.
Mr. Chairman, earlier in the year, we were approached with another special exception request, similar to this request, in Orange Township, which is A2. And we were hit by the agricultural business and world hard that we were impeding on agriculture.
I remember.
And a few months later, we get an application, or a few weeks later, we get an application for special exception in A1 for basically the same purpose. And those people that have applied for the application are involved in agriculture, have been for 45 years, I believe you stated. And, okay, let's don't look at the DORA IDEM permit that has been granted. Let's look at the development of Fayette County and agriculture and agricultural growth. We're asking to put a special exception in an A1, our best, our greatest agricultural part of our community and our county that will hinder any future growth of agriculture. How can someone of 45 years in agriculture stand here and want to hinder the future growth of agriculture in our greatest producing part of Fayette County? How can we do that? No, that's a statement. That's what we're faced with tonight. It doesn't have anything, you're right, it doesn't have anything to do with the DORA permit. What it has to do with is what we will hinder in the future growth of Fayette County agriculture. In Posey and Fairview Township, which is A1, our prime agricultural community. And if we allow this to happen, the next thing that the bills may come to us with complaints of the combines in the adjoining properties are making too much dust on our recreational area. The headlights are bothering our recreational area. So then we'll try to shut down the crop production in Fayette County so that we can build more recreational areas and more houses. So I'm just concerned of where this special exception will take the future growth of Fayette County. We have time and time again shut down future opportunities for Fayette County. So why don't we just roll up the sidewalks
No, we don't want to do that.
and throw Fayette County away? Because we've run industry out of here. We've had opportunities in the past for industrial growth, and we've pushed them away because we didn't want that kind of industry. We're now, 4, 5, 6 years ago, we redid our ordinance to be one of the most strict limitations on animal growth in the state of Indiana. We did that. We created areas where we could build CAFOs, and now we're here today trying to shut those down. I'm not referring at all to the DORA permit. You're right, it doesn't really matter. What matters is what we're going to do to the future of agricultural growth in Fayette County.
Everybody said it, and I totally agree. This is not about a CFO petition tonight. That is not what this is about. But I also agree with what Gary is saying. I guess you call it circumstantial evidence. Now, I can't vote up here. I have to vote on facts, and I have to vote on evidence, and I have to vote on the ordinance. But it's clear to me, I think it should be clear to everybody, that the reason for that picnic table is to stop a CAFO in that area. I think that's clear. I listened when you were asked the question, would you be willing to accept conditions to have this picnic area that people say they enjoy and that they like and you like to have it, with the condition that it not impede a normal growth of agriculture. That's page 55 in our comprehensive plan, by the way. It says, in order to protect our rural heritage, farmers should be allowed more opportunities to generate income from their land with agricultural related businesses. That's the rule that this commission has to live by. That's what rules us. Now, I don't know about any future CAFO petition that may come before this group. We will look at that one just like we do any that comes along. That's not what we're about tonight. I totally agree with Mr. Naylor that we're about agriculture. We're about whether agriculture can still succeed and improve and grow in Fayette County. I wish you would have said yes. Well, if it takes a condition of not affecting the setbacks, and we can have, I wish you'd have said yes, then we could do something to help folks that want to have this picnic table.
I think part of the concern, sir, is that no one would want to use a public facility that's next to a CFO.
But there's not one there. You've already said it.
But if you keep bringing up the CFO,
But there's not one
we're
there.
not talking about the CFO.
We're talking about an area that has been designated as a potential growth for confined feeding operations. So all we're saying is, if you want to park there, you want a picnic table there, are you willing to have that as a condition to continue to allow that area to grow with CFOs?
That wasn't the original question that was asked.
I thought that was pretty well word for word what was asked. Are you willing to?
If we put that condition on there though, and one is approved in that area, what Mr. Jones was stating was, then it would negate the use of having that public area because nobody would want to come there. So it's the chicken and the egg, however you want to look at it, but if it did get approved, a CAFO at a future date, then nobody would want to come there. The question isn't, and I understand the need to preserve A1. I do understand that. It very easily could be in your...
It's a requirement under our comprehensive plan. It's a requirement.
My question would be, is it allowed then? Why is a public recreational facility allowed there? Why, when this stringent CFO was built, why didn't they ban parks, new parks within A1 districts? The same could be said, why don't we ban churches in A1 districts? Why don't we ban schools, new schools in A1 districts? None of those things were put in there, they're part of it. But you have the right to change your ordinances. You have the right to change the CFO ordinance. You can change and make a public recreation not a permitted exception in A1. We didn't write those rules. Those are your rules, and you can change them as you see fit. But as it stands today, it is allowed per your rules and those. And if you change them in the future, that would be the new rules.
And on a one by one case, we can also add conditions to that, allowing that park in an A1 area.
Or deny. That's the other thing we can do to comply with this requirement.
I just want to speak to the zoning ordinance on the CFO side.
Karen, I think you know a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Is this considered public comment?
Yeah, we need
Yeah.
to.
Oh,
It's a public
yeah,
comment.
yeah, it's, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, is there any other questions?
Do we want to go page by page for the 6 criteria, like?
No,
requested?
I'm not saying go page by page
But
through
talk
that.
about the-
It's, yeah, I mean.
Bill's saying reference, if you want to reference
Reference
a
each
question
one.
to a particular criteria, right?
Yeah, discuss each criteria.
Yes.
I can make a comment, or make a comment, and I agree with you and Garrett. But I think it's kind of simple if you look at the list that you provided. This establishment of a special exception will not impede the normal and orderly development improvement of the surrounding property for usage permitted in the district. This is going to, in my opinion, and this is subjective, it is going to impede in future, just like Gary and our president said. So
It's
technically.
also detrimental to the general welfare.
Yeah, technically, it doesn't meet the conditions for the approval of the special exception, in my opinion. And that's all I've got to say.
And Bill, what's your opinion to the ADA compliance with regard to our transition plan, stating that new structures must be in compliance with federal law?
I don't have enough in my head about it at this particular point in time, really, to say anything.
I know that both the
Because
city and the
I
county
don't
have
want,
spent
I don't want to
extensive
misspeak.
amounts of money. We're currently spending extensive amounts of money on sidewalks that are ADA compliant throughout the county. So if we have the intent of all new structures that are public spaces being ADA compliant, and this structure isn't ADA compliant, I think the city's ADA officer might be Brad Coulter. I don't know.
Well,
the
this,
county's.
this would be the, it's,
Who's the
Adrian,
county?
who's the
ADA
ADA?
compliance?
Adrian Ellis.
Adrian, yeah. I mean, that'd be a question for Adrian.
And then to the bills, what is your response to the not being, within our transition plan for the ADA, which says that new structures that are open to the public have to meet that requirement? I know the state has certain exceptions to old buildings if you're in a historic area. This obviously isn't historic, it was built in May of this past year.
It can hardly be grandfathered in, is what you're stating.
So what's the?
I can't, I'm sure I have less knowledge of your ADA plan than Bill does in my head, so I can't speak to your Fayette County plan as it relates to that.
Would you consider that, an acceptable condition of a special exception, meeting our county's already established
Well,
requirements?
that would be, ultimately, the conditions are placed on approval are at the Board of Zoning Appeals. So now if.
Per our recommendation.
If a recommendation, you could, if so inclined to, say, make a favorable recommendation, you can include things like that in the recommendation. But the zoning board does not have to accept every bit of your recommendation.
Any further questions or comments? Okay, we're ready for a motion. We can have a motion to forward a favorable recommendation on this petition. We can have a motion to forward an unfavorable recommendation, or a motion for no recommendation.
Which I don't recommend.
Well,
When we
No
just vote
recommendation.
yes or no, will you want it?
the no
Make it
recommendation
simple.
would be a result of not being able to pass either a favorable or an unfavorable. We would not make a motion.
About the
for
only
an
time that would
unfavorable.
come into play is
Right, that's correct.
if we barely had a quorum and were unable to
Yes.
receive a majority. Then it
So at
would
this
have to
point,
go
with a
to the
quorum,
next.
let's see,
We-
good
yeah, we have a
discussion, I
quorum.
think some very good discussion. Hopefully, this body will be able
A
to move
recommendation.
forward with a recommendation.
I make a motion that we provide, send an unfavorable recommendation. I have several points on each of these that gives me a reason for saying no for approval. And I recommend an unfavorable recommendation for special acceptance.
Okay, so we have a motion before the commission for an unfavorable recommendation on this petition. Is there a second to that motion?
You're saying vote yes or no, whether you want it or not, is what I'm.
We're talking only about a
recommending an unfavorable
recommendation.
recommendation against,
An
against it
unfavorable
for a
recommendation
special
To the
exception
BZA.
to the Board of
to
Zoning.
the BZA.
The motion is,
That this
Unfavorable.
commission, the area plan, forward an unfavorable recommendation to the BZA.
second.
So we have a motion and a second that we forward an unfavorable recommendation on this petition. I've lost my agenda. I want to see. On petition number 14798 to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Is there any questions on this motion? Hearing no questions, we will have a vote. Roll call, please.
Ruby Seiler,
Yes.
Leota King,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Gary,
Yes.
Kay Riker Payton,
Yes.
Chad Frank,
Yes.
Bill Mackey.
Yes.
That's it.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is the director's report. Hopefully you have one of those in front of you.
I recommend we accept the director's report.
We have a motion to accept the report as presented. Is there a second?
So,
Have a motion and a second to accept the report as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item is adjournment.
motion to adjourn, sir.
Have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.
now declare the October 16th, 2019 BZA meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call of attendance.
Carrie Steele,
Here.
Bill Crawford,
Here.
Jeff Fisher,
Here.
Ruby Seiler,
Here.
Leota King,
Here.
Bill McDaniel,
Present.
Jeff Westling,
Present.
and myself.
Okay. Approval of the minutes, August 12th, 2019. September 9th, 2019, BZA meeting.
I don't have August, but we got September's.
I need a motion.
I wasn't here, so I'm not making a motion.
I'll make a motion. We approved.
Okay.
Ruby?
I'll second.
All right, we got a motion made and properly second to approve the minutes from September 9th, 2019. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carried. Okay, first up on the agenda is petition number 14856 for Rich and Susie Owen, asking for a special exception for a filling station. And due to the fact that I'm friends, well, at least I think I'm friends with them. They may not, but I'm going to go ahead and abstain from this part of the meeting. So Carrie's going to take over this part of the meeting, and then I'll come back with the second part.
Can I just share from here? Does it matter?
Oh, you want to do it now?
Here, I'll go ahead.
No, we want you to sit on the throne.
Now that I'm under Bill's name, I can roll with impunity, right? 'Cause it's under
That's
Bill's.
it. Just pretend you're Bill.
Okay, so start the public hearing for petition 14856, Richard and Susan Owen, special exception for a filling station. Go ahead and come
I would
forward.
just, thank you for the time. My name is David Leather with National Oil, and I'll speak for the Owenses. I've been talking to them for, seems like a year and a half on developing this site. We have participation from my company, National Oil, for quite a bit of money to partner with them. Marathon is excited about it. That's why we're gonna do a Marathon flag. As we went through this application for special exemption, I think we did meet all the requirements, the 6 different requirements. I think we understand that they're kind of in a quiet part of the town, in a neighborhood area. We're very cognizant of, hours of operation, for example. These guys live there, so the lighting will be appropriate. I think it'll just add to their business. It's gonna be just a good revenue builder for them, and hopefully, speaking for myself as a businessman, that's gonna take you home for retirement eventually and pass on to kids. So I think it'll just be a good addition, so we appreciate approval.
And the site plan that Mr. Gobin, the updated site plan with the traffic circulation plan and site plan, met my concerns, provides more stacking space between the pumps and the Indiana 44, and it then provides better and safer circulation. Because, yeah, particularly up there on 44. Got rid of that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Questions, hey, anybody? Thank you.
Any remonstrators? Okay, accept the motion.
I accept the motion.
For
For it.
to approve it?
Approve it.
Okay. Do you have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor to approve the special exception for the filling station for Richard and Susie Owen, petition 14856. Roll call vote?
Carrie Steele,
Yes.
Bill, he's not voting. Jeff Fisher,
Yes.
Ruby,
Yes.
Leota.
Yes.
All right. Special exception approved. Talk to Bill. Do they need anything from you to move forward?
Oh, actually, what you will need to do is, since for this one right here, since you're the chairperson, I'll need your signature here. Pass that down to Bev for hers.
Never forgot mine. 16? Yeah, 16.
All right, I think it's approved, and do they need anything from you before they can move forward?
All of these, when it comes time, will be the, finalized site plan, construction plans, and, the approval from, IDEM for the tanks.
All right,
Very good, we appreciate it, thank you. Thank you.
thanks for your patience tonight.
That's right. I think this is the cities. That's right, that one's the cities. There's a few times I walked off with it.
Okay. So up next on the agenda is petition number 14798, asking for a special exception for a public recreational facility. Since I think all the members were present.
Well, have the people also. They already indicated one time they weren't up to it. Okay. Yep, okay.
All right, we're going to go ahead and hear the petitioner's side of what they're wanting to do.
All brand new material.
Are you sure? Are you sure? Now,
I think I heard a little discussion, was it
Yeah.
on whether or not to present again, since I think...
well, that'd be the one, is if both sides were amenable to the zoning board adopting what had been presented previously. If both were amenable to it, the zoning board could do that.
All right. Yep.
Hey, well, I'll be glad to give an abbreviated version or a real quick run through it if everybody was here.
Take as much time as you want.
Yep.
I need to sign in.
Yeah, if you would,
It's the
since
same
it's the
list.
BZA, just flip the page over, please. Yeah, okay.
It's very, very official.
Yes.
That's the BZA page right there.
Yes.
All right, BZA on the top.
There you go.
Carl Hilton used to always said you wouldn't get paid if you didn't sign in.
Yeah.
Well, for those that haven't heard, John Bills, I'm the applicant's Mark and Dina Bills' son. I'm here speaking on their behalf tonight and running through the case. Looks like he's pulling it back up here.
Oh, great, thank you.
The other one. Yeah, sorry, we're gonna hit this one after. I believe, yeah. That's it, thank you very much. Let's start back over. So John Bill's here on behalf of the applicants Mark and Dina Bill. As everybody knows, here to talk about a special exception 45, the public recreation facility. The agenda here that we're going to run through, quick overview, background, timeline, show that we believe we have the community support of the people within the vicinity, and then try to demonstrate that we believe that we're meeting the requirements of a special exception, and then open up for questions from everybody. Bill's property overview. This is the 10-acre tract that is part of it. It's on the Fayette and Rush County line. They're on the east side of the county line there. Up in the corner where the star is on the picture to the left is where the structure that's in question is currently present and where the parcel would be. You can see in the overview just the proximity of where it's at for those that aren't familiar in relation to Connorsville up in Posey Township. The quick background, like I said, Mark Bills and Dina Bills are here. They are my parents. Mark's been a member of the community, lived within a mile of this area for since he was born, 67 years. He grew up farming there, farmed with his family farm. His father farmed the area there where adjacent to where he's at, and he's been there his whole life. Started 45 plus years ago with his father and joined in on the family farm. My mom, Dina, joined the community when they were in college, got married. She moved back to the area and then raised 3 children. They bought this property 30 plus years ago, or right around 30 years ago, and they actually bought it for her, for my mom's parents to move into. My grandparents, they retired there and moved in so that we could spend time with them, the kids, grandkids, and that, and be closer. Unfortunately, when they passed them, my parents moved right around the corner. They were living around the corner at the time, moved into this property. As with many people retiring or approaching the retirement age, you know, the property means a lot to them. Their house means a lot. It's where they have a lot of their retirement, their investment wrapped up within that, the property values of their home there. Here, it's really just in your package for representative to answer questions if we needed to look at the specifics of it. But this was part of our application. It's the plat of survey showing the parcel of ground that we put it on. So this is actually, I think it's roughly a 1 acre parcel that's in that corner. As was discussed, if you were present at the previous meeting, if and when we got approval for the special exception, we would do a parcel split and have this 1 acre tract that is shown in our application. Part of there, you can see the representation of where the actual structure sits within that parcel on here. And here is a picture of the public picnic shelter, the recreational facility that's in question. There's a picture of it. Moving on to community support, you know, the thing about it is, the question came up, it's in the next slide on here, you're going to see where 47 members signed it. You know, and the question was, well, when was that done? I think it was June 30th. But the thing was, that came out of that, which I didn't think to even bring up, it was done in 1 day. He went around the neighborhood, close proximity to where it is, spoke to the neighbors, everybody around. 100% of those neighbors signed the petition. Not a single one said, oh no, we think you're doing something wrong. Nobody said, we don't want this here, we aren't going to use it. 100% of the people he spoke to signed it on the first time to the door. A few of the comments that were spoken about there, to get an idea of what we're dealing with. You know, one was much appreciated, family will utilize it. One was saying, I'm a farmer, I enjoy seeing people at the shelter. It's a very nice family gathering area, nice to have in the area, nice place for the community to gather. And if you were here for the previous one, you saw, I'm not sure if they're still going to be here to speak, but you saw that a couple people from the community actually come out to speak, that they and their families have been using it. Moving on to really the meat of the presentation and what we're all here for is the importance of the ordinances, the zoning ordinance here is there are clear criteria that need to be met in order for a special exception to get approved. And it's also very clear that those are the only items that you're supposed to consider when approving the special exception. So, you know, with that, if you meet the 6, it should be approved, and that there's no option other than to approve it, is the way it's written. So it is very clear, if we meet them, then you have no option other than to approve them. I'm going to run through here real quick. Option 1, the establishment, maintenance, or operation of the special exception will not be detrimental or endanger the public health. The approval of the special exception is unlikely, this is in the staff report, is unlikely to be detrimental to the public health and public safety of the community. There were a couple concerns that were brought up about a child wandering off, different things that could probably be said about any park, but wasn't a main point of contention, and it has to be believed that a public park, no more than public parks that are in your community today, are a danger to the community, public safety. The staff report does, though, hone in on that it is very likely to be detrimental to the general welfare. The basis for the argument, however, is that the staff report is approving a public park will allow a ban on the CFOs in the future. Again, this isn't what this is about tonight, and I know there's a lot of discussion at Planning Commission, for those that heard it, about that. In essence, that's what this will do. But again, if that is what the county wants, I'm not here to say the county shouldn't ban public parks in A1 districts. You have the right to do that. You can change your ordinances at any time, go through the process to allow for that change. But currently, they don't. And if that was the intent, that's what the rules should say, that they're not allowed within them. The second item that must be met is that it will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of the other property in the immediate vicinity for the purposes already permitted, nor substantially diminish and impair the property values within the neighborhood. The key words in all of that is already permitted. And it's for the property values as they are permitted today. In the staff report, they say that it will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment for other property in the immediate vicinity for the purposes already permitted. So the staff has even weighed in and said that that is the case. Remonstrators, and they got up during their time and spoke exactly to this, all about the economics of CFOs and how this will be injurious. The reality is that is not an already permitted use. There's actual state law that speaks to this, S&S Enterprises Incorporated versus Marion County Board of Zoning Appeals. A special exception is a use permitted under the zoning ordinance upon the showing of certain statutory criteria. A special exception is not permitted use until it has been proven or met those statutory requirements. Therefore, there is no permitted use currently within the vicinity for any use that's not currently being done. It can still remain farmed, it can still have cornfields being filled, anything that does not require a special exception. Item 3, the establishment of the special exception will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of surrounding property for uses permitted in the district. Again, APC staff report acknowledges the establishment of this special exception will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of the surrounding property use permitted in the district. Again, going back to the fact that it must be a permitted use. This is a small project. It's serving the public good. We're not asking for public funding. We're not asking for anything from that other than to allow other people within the public to use this facility. The opposition will attempt to make this about the potential future development of other special exceptions. In the words itself, by definition, special exceptions are not normal. They also are not permitted within the area. So it is not, that portion of it's not relevant to this point per the statutes. Per the previous case I'll discuss, special exceptions are not permitted until they prove they meet the criteria set forth in the zoning ordinance. Adequate utilities, access roads, and other necessary facilities have been or are being provided. APC staff acknowledges or brings up the fact that there could be a concern, or they have in the past, about potential the need for a drainage culvert underneath the driveway. They also acknowledge that that would be an easy fix, and we're here to say that we would work with, it's actually dictated by the Rush County Highway Department, we would work with them, and if deemed necessary, install the culvert as a condition to the approval. The fifth item, adequate measures have been or will be taken to provide ingress or egress so designed as to minimize traffic congestion in the public streets. Again, it was noted in there that there's need for access on the drive for 2-lane traffic. Again, we'd be more than willing to widen it. I believe it's like at 16 or 17 feet now. We would widen it to 24 feet to allow for that adequate access to and from the site as a condition to the approval. The sixth and final one, which will probably get most of the conversation again as part of the debate here tonight and good conversation that came out of the first portion. It says that the establishment, maintenance, or operation of the special exception will not contravene the principles of reinvestment, revitalization, and the avoidance of unintended consequences as set forth in the Fayette County Comprehensive Plan. The creation of such a public amenity will serve the public good and work in harmony with both the letter and the spirit of the Fayette County Comprehensive Plan. The public park shelter is already being used by the public for recreation and enjoyment, as the people spoke about previously from the community. There's people that have been using it. You know, the question was asked how many. We don't know the exact number, but there's people each week coming in and out of there, stopping to have lunch, stopping in the evening, kids with their parents, people at lunch. One of them mentioned motorcycles. I'm not sure why, but that's been a common spot for motorcycles to stop and for a pit stop, have a bite to eat, to drink, whatever, while they're there. The comprehensive plan comments on the benefits of public parks. So there's going to be talk about, and there is, in the comprehensive plan, it talks about the need for agricultural growth and for all the things involved with that. It absolutely is in there. But it's also in there that there's a need for public parks and that there's a concern on how to fund them. Here's an opportunity to give something back to the community for their use at no cost to the community, to the public, to Fayette County. It's all being funded by a private citizen, but for public good. APC staff report states that the approval of the special exception will have unintended consequences to the Fayette County policy. So Mr. McDaniel had that in his report. If the county did not intend, I would say, to allow a public park in areas where a potential CFO could be built in the future, they would not have allowed it to be a special exception in A1 zoning. That was the main discussion point with the area planning board before that, well, this serves as a ban, that this is going to ban them. We don't get to choose what does and doesn't ban the progression of agriculture. We're only a resident. Staff does, the Board of Zoning Appeals does, they get to work through, and they can change their ordinances to allow or disallow whatever they would want. The sounds are that it is a main concern to allow agricultural growth. Completely understand that. Then it's also within the power to change the ordinances and not allow it to be a special exception. However, as it sits today, a public recreational facility is a permitted special exception within the area, and it's something we can come forward and ask for. Whereas it seems like they're asking for it to not be allowed in that. So with that, that's just the closing remarks, is that if the intent of the Area Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners was to ban new confined feeding operations in Fayette County, the ordinance would have explicitly banned confined feeding operations. And that's one of the statements that has been said several times. But alternatively, the same would be said. If they wanted to ban public parks in A1, it's a very easy change. It could have been included. They said 6 years of work went into creating the ordinances. I'm not sure if that was the main intent, why it wouldn't have been included in there. Also could have been said that grandfathered parks or other things, but none of that's in there. We're just here trying to follow the actual ordinances as they're written and as they should be applied to all residents equally, my parents as well as neighbors. With that, I'll turn it over for any questions that the Board of Zoning Appeals may have for me.
Questions?
One of the questions that I have is, and maybe this is it better to have comments later at the end, or does it matter what order?
You can ask him questions now.
Yeah. One of my questions is about, you've made several comments about how a potential CFO special exception is not any worse, better, different. A special exception is a special exception. It doesn't matter if it's yours, if it's theirs, if it's for whatever. If it's for Falmouth Farm Supply wanting to expand closer to your picnic area, that seems like a pretty big potential, right? I mean, I think they're growing.
And if they come forward, they should be given all the same latitude that the zoning ordinances have.
Exactly.
And I would agree with that. I believe in development. I'm a
Right.
developer.
And so I guess it seems as if you're wanting your special exception to have more weight, like you're saying, as you're going through the way you're presenting it, it appears as if your special exception has more weight because we didn't explicitly ban your particular type of special exception. Since it wasn't banned in our A1 district, then your special exception gets more weight than any other special exception in that district. And the reason I'm getting that is, a minute ago you had up there that we would have just banned it, I think is how it was. The intent of the area, if the intent of the area plan commissioners was to ban new public parks from Fayette County, the ordinance would have explicitly banned public parks. One, as a county, we can't just ban any one type of development on its face. We can pick districts, we can do things like that, but we can't say, no, we're not having this type of industry anywhere in our county. It's really, really, really hard to do, and it's not something any county's interested in. If I'm correct, you just can't say, sorry, we're not having X type of growth here. So the reason we didn't ban any one of those things is because we're not legally allowed to. Number two, when you say we would have just banned a public park, that seems as if we're trying to ban all public parks, and that's not the case. We're only ruling on your special exception. So I'm not sure why you're bringing in this whole banning thing if your special exception isn't any more important than anybody else's.
So I don't think ours is any more important than any special exception. It's up to the board to hear them in the order of which they're applied for. And you have to hear each one as by the application date of how they're submitted and go through them. So we don't think ours is any more important, but it's the one here before the board tonight for their vote and for their consideration. As for banning all public parks or any, that's actually exactly what the special exception list does. It lists which zoning districts, what special exception can go in. And A1's one of them listed next to them, so you could easily
Banning is very
disallow
different than
that.
allowing a special exception. Banning, there's a different connotation and a different application than just you know, if the ordinance is silent on it, that's one thing. I think what you're portraying may not necessarily be what you're getting at.
And it could be, maybe I'm using the wrong nomenclature with it. Ultimately, in your charts of special exceptions, if it didn't say A1 next to public recreation facility, I couldn't make this application tonight, yet it does allow that. So we're just trying to follow the ordinance. You could remove A1 from that special exception for a public recreation facility. That's
Yes, I
within the
agree with that.
county's.
Totally, yeah.
And I believe that if that was the intent, to protect all A1 district for only agricultural and that, you could not allow churches in A1s. You could not allow schools, you could not allow new parks. You could grandfather the old ones, but any of the new ones, but that's not what the regulations or the codes say.
Okay.
John, can I say something? Yeah, Ms. Steele, and I'm Scott Jones, we met previously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you look at the preceding slide before the one that
Yes.
we're looking at, you pulled that language directly from the staff report that talked about if the ordinance had the intent of banning CFOs, it would have done that. We're trying to show the wordplay that it should work both ways, and that the CFO as a special exception and the public park as a special exception have equal footing. That was the intent of those slides. And I'm sorry that I messed those up.
My next question is about whether or not you actually, and this is partially a conversation that I think Bill and Jeff are going to chime in on. It is my understanding, and based on some conversations earlier, that this was sort of modeled modeled after another similar thing in the county. And my understanding, and I have very intimate knowledge of the other similar situation. Number one, it is not on Mr. Smith's property. Number two, it does not have a special exception. It is not a public use area. It is not creating a boundary for a farm should a farm be picked up to go there. It never came before the board. It's never asked for anything. And it operated for several years. My understanding now it's closed. I could be wrong. I don't drive that way anymore, so I don't know. But it's my understanding it's now closed. But at some point in time, it did operate as a public use area in terms of it operated as a de facto public use area because they had actually probably a little more scenic than where y'all are at, right? Like it's rolling, there's trees around. So yeah, people used it some. I don't know how much, I don't really care. But my understanding is that you can have this picnic area as it is right now with the signage, and you don't need a special exception. That you want a special exception so that you can create the boundary.
I can't speak to it. I believe for it to be open to the public, we would need to have the special exception for it.
I don't believe so.
Well, I guess regardless, we're here before asking for it, so I'm not sure the full intent there, but we are here before asking for it.
Actually, would have had to. Because basically all it was is, as part of the conversation I had with Mr. Johnson, was that by just placing that there on their property without going through any type of process of making it official, it really is no different than putting a picnic shelter in your own backyard.
Which is exactly what is going on in other areas of the county without an issue. So it seems like they can do what, you can have a park, you can open it up, like you can have people on there, you can have the insurance, you can do all of these great community things. You're right, parks are great for the community. I don't think anyone is disputing that parks aren't good, because they are. On the face of them. But I don't think that a special exception is required to provide that on your property. I don't think you have to have that.
What would be the reasoning for having to have this special exception labeled with that?
Okay, number one is the idea is that to have this public facility, that to get it actually approved, to get some type of formal official status.
Why?
That's
Because it involves the public, is that why?
part of it.
But if they were out there operating today, would any of our code enforcements, if you drove by it, would it be a violation of our code if they had it today as it is, they're paying their own insurance, would it be a violation of our codes right now?
Could be. I mean, I just can't really answer that question unequivocally right now.
Mr. Westling, do you know off the
Well,
top of your head?
okay, but first of all, if they have a picnic table in their backyard and they have a canopy over the picnic table and they allow people to come have lunch on
Yeah,
there, and it's
that's-
not classified as a public park, then that's going to fit under different rules. I think they're here for the classification of being a public park.
But
I think your question is that are they here to change the actual use, to get the use to be a public park, or are they here to get the status that would then conflict with CFO ordinances?
Yes.
Because if they had the same thing in their backyard, they had a picnic table, they had a canopy over it, they allowed people to come and
They had a
stop and
sign,
have
they had the
lunch.
same thing, they had the same things.
Well, they call it a public park, I think, in the signs, I can't remember, but something along those lines. Then it wouldn't conflict with CFO ordinance. So I certainly don't want to speak for the petitioners, but I mean, I think that's the distinction, and I think that's what you're kind of trying to make.
Yes, I mean, I think it's not,
Well, it's the only way to really give it a special status.
To have it be called a public park.
Yeah, a special
They have to come-
status.
Yes.
and so the only way to be able to create a boundary for any type of additional, whether it's a CFO, whether it's Falmouth expanding, whether it's another industry that we can't even fathom right now. Earlier, I think somebody, Little Blue Men, whatever, whatever that scenario is, it just seems like it's a runaround to create a buffer to protect. It doesn't feel like it's a genuine, addition to the community.
Anyone else? Okay, I think we're done with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yep. We'll see you again, I bet. Okay. Anyone else from the audience that would like to comment?
Demonstrator.
Yeah.
Trip on Scott's briefcase, or I'll be memorialized on YouTube forever.
We've already
Yeah,
had that.
this didn't happen at the very start of the meeting, so you have a problem.
Yeah, that's right.
And it wasn't falling off the stage.
Yeah, I'm glad we're not in front of stage. That gives me no panic for next
Yes.
month or what that.
Yeah, I'm going to avoid them from here on out.
My name's Jeff Rocker. I'm here representing the Dora family. And again, in respect to this board's time, I appreciate you all being here late. You can have an early breakfast, I seem like, when we get home. I want to get right into the criterion. Talking about whether it's going to be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, or general welfare. I think we're sort of setting some of these rules on their head a little bit, listening to the petitioner speak. Certainly, Fayette County could institute whatever laws they had. It wouldn't be this board's job. It wouldn't be the last board's job. I guess it'd be your legislative body to create whatever ordinances you want. That's a tool. The BZA is a whole separate set of tools that can do the same thing. You have the right. The reason we're all here tonight is because you can do the same thing. You can say something's not appropriate in a location. And if a special exception wasn't one of the appropriate tools, then there are variances, and those are a lot more fun even than this. So there's 2 or 3 different ways that parks or CFOs or anything can be slotted in this county. Our position is that this follows the staff report. This is going to be detrimental to the general welfare of Fayette County. I do want to clear up, while I do represent the Doras, everything that I'm saying applies to every CFO. It applies to every farm operation. It doesn't just apply to Drew Dora and his application that will come or may come. It applies to everyone that might come anytime in the future in any place in this county. Going forward, a CFO in the eastern region of Indiana, whether it's next door to these folks, whether it's across the road, whether it's wherever, generates $2.76,508,000 in new income and about 24 jobs, according to the Kelley School of Business in Indiana University. The economic annual impact is $1,951,000. Again, Kelley School of Business, Indiana University. That's the impact of any CFO on this county, not on Drew Dora, on this county. Those jobs are not Drew, it's not 24 Drew Doras It's 24 individuals in this community that could have a job, and this type of an approval would stop those people in a large chunk of this county. In addition, with regard to the general welfare, as I mentioned at the last hearing, this proposed plan is rife with violations of the American with Disability Act, as well as Fayette County's ADA compliance program that you have well underway, and by the looks of it, I'm sure it costs a pretty penny. This is a new organization, a new construction. It has to be, must be, mandated to be in compliance with those rules, both by this county and the federal government, who doesn't necessarily care what any of us say, apparently. It's, they have the right to say that and make it stick. Another point with regard to the general welfare of the community, and I think we talked about a little bit or heard some testimony or some commentary at the last hearing about whether this is really a safe place to have a park. Yes, there are lots of parks. Most parks do have local amenities. You're trying to put it next to a field or a stream or a mountain or whatever kinds of beautiful amenities your county has. I think putting it 20 feet from a road where you have had talking about large trucks, putting it surrounded on multiple sides by agricultural equipment with chemical sprays and combines and plows and bean planters. That 4-year-old kid may be happy to see that there's corn there because that might be the safest time of year. With regard to whether this will be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property, there's been a lot of talk about this. This is obviously for the point of stopping CFOs. This is the real answer. I know no one wants to say it. I'll say it. This shelter was built around May 3rd, 2 months after the bills were put on written notice 2 times, and wrote 3 letters remonstrating to IDEM against a CFO application. Zone A1 is prime agricultural land. That's your best land for farming. Whether it's a CFO, whether it's a cornfield, whether it's a bean field, whether it's an alpaca farm. This type of a use is an encroachment into farming land with a use that doesn't belong there. Doesn't belong there any more than a car dealership belongs there. Doesn't belong there any more than anything else in the industrial development would belong there. This is the problem. In your comprehensive plan, you've got a great example. Chiropractor comes in, wants to put a chiropractic practice in his home because he doesn't want to go to a retail or service district and pay those expensive rents. He comes before this body, he gets a special exception to operate out of his home. Then his business fails. Now you've got a commercial enterprise in a residential subdivision. And the unintended consequence is you're impacting all of those residential values because who wants to live next door to a business? This is the same thing. You're putting a park, maybe there are A1 districts. Certainly there might be, every piece of property is unique, we know that. I'm sure there are places in the A1 district where there'd be a beautiful place for a park. That doesn't mean this one is that place. That doesn't mean this piece of property in an intensive agricultural zone, in the best intensive agricultural zone, and in the zone that has the best capability for animal agriculture. There's never going to be an animal agriculture business 2 blocks from downtown Connersville. It isn't going to be there. It's going to be in the north part of your county, because if you look at those maps, that's where the holes in the map say they can't be. They just can't be anywhere else. So if we start letting people plug all the holes, few that they are, in a map in Fayette County where it's already darn hard to put one, then it'll be real easy to plug those haps and we can all happily go down the road with no industry. I should note again with regard to that safety fact, as Mr. Bills indicated, there are no facilities, there are no utilities, there are no water facilities, there are no bathroom facilities, there's no lights. There was some testimony earlier tonight that there are people there in the evenings on motorcycles. Well, that's great. We've run a bunch of people in the dark sitting there on someone's property pulling out onto a highway with no lights. So it just keeps kind of getting better. Unintended consequences, Mr. Bills talked a lot about this. We talked a lot about this at the last hearing. This is an attempt from Bills to create private zoning. He wants to have his own zoning classification as a bubble in around his house that allows him to have what he wants. I don't blame him for wanting to do that. I just don't feel like it's something that we should support. It's not something that we should support where it hurts industry like agriculture, where it hurts potential future industry like expansion of agriculture, whether it's Drew Dora or Joe Blow or the Man in the Moon, doesn't matter. It's going to impact it. It's going to impact all of them, and it's going to send a very clean signal out. Don't mistake this. Everybody in the state will play this game, and that game is what it is. I don't think you have to support that by any stretch. The comprehensive plan has lots of interesting pieces that speak to this. How much of an effect will rural development have on a local farmer's ability to adopt a more intensive agricultural practice in the future? We're not talking about 2 ears of corn on a head, a stalk of corn. We're talking about animal agriculture there. That's what you're talking about. And the impact is one, right? It goes from possible to impossible. It goes from however many acres the ordinance requires to 2,000 where none can be, right? That's the impact. Your page 55 of your comprehensive plan says, in order to protect our rural heritage, farmers should be allowed more opportunities to generate income from their land with agricultural related businesses. It doesn't say unless Mr. Bills doesn't want it to happen, right? I agree that special exceptions have rules. If you meet the rules, you should be permitted. But lots of those rules speak to when you plant a seed that ends up being a landmine that blows up an entire industry in your neighborhood. That's exactly why you don't have a permitted use. You have a conditional use or a special exception where you folks get to think about it and make a unique decision on unique circumstances, and that's why I'm glad we're here for that. Your comprehensive plan asks the question, what's happening to farmland? This is what's happening to farmland. People are educating each other on the internet, on Facebook, about how to stop anything. How to stop Walmart, how to stop a factory, how to stop a road, how to stop a hog operation. A wind farm is a local example. I watched those. I pity all of you for having to sit through that. That was mind-numbing. It's group think. We've educated each other how to do the NIMBY dance, right? Not in my backyard. And here's another example, and that's, in this case, it's agriculture that is in the bullseye. Mr. Bills indicated that this is a gift to Fayette County that they're going to do on their dime. It has no cost to Fayette County except the cost to agriculture. Except that cost. The cost will be borne by the agricultural community, whether it's here or whether it's somewhere else in this county or whether it's in another county in the state. This is the path that we're heading down. With regard to the application itself, even if we wanted it, we see, first of all, the shelter was built illegally. It was built without a permit, didn't have a local permit, didn't have a state permit. It was required to have that because any shelter that's meant for public use is required by law, by Indiana state law, to have a permit. Didn't get a permit, built it because time was of the essence, folks. We had to get this up and right now because this process would have allowed that those potential CFOs to move further down the road and more likely to happen. I mentioned the ADA. The ADA requires several things that are not evident here. Has to have a van accessible space with proper aisle access on the surface that's stable, firm, and slip resistant. That is not gravel. The route from the parking to the shelter is not stable, firm, or slip resistant, and again, that doesn't mean gravel. The route from the parking to the shelter contains no abrupt level changes greater than 1/4 of an inch. Sound like a broken record, that's not gravel. and there's no accessible route from the parking to the facility, and the facility does not have ADA compliant facilities once you get there. That picnic table is not ADA compliant. So nothing about this seat complies with either the building codes or the federal law that mandates all of us, everybody in Indiana, every county, to follow it. Two provisions that I'll get out of your hair. Indiana has stated in no uncertain terms, it just got protected again last year, the Right to Farm Act. The General Assembly declares that it's the policy of the state to conserve, protect, and encourage the development and improvement of its agricultural land for the production of food and other agricultural products. The General Assembly finds that when non-agricultural land uses extend into agricultural areas, agricultural operations often become the subject of nuisance suits. As a result, agricultural operations are sometimes forced to cease operations, and this is where we counter with from what we heard from Mr. Bills. It isn't just people moving next door to farms, because we say, and many persons will be discouraged from making investments in farm operations. Future tense. It is the purpose of this section to reduce the loss to the state of its agricultural resources by limiting the circumstances under which agricultural operations may be deemed a nuisance. We have another section in Indiana called Agricultural Canon that instructs us how to interpret every law in the state of Indiana, every single one. The General Assembly declares that it's the policy of the state to conserve, protect, and encourage the development and improvement of agriculture, agricultural businesses, and agricultural land for the production of food, fuel, fiber, and other agricultural products. The Indiana Code, of which the zoning rules are part, shall be construed to protect the rights of farmers to choose among all generally accepted farming and livestock production practices, including the use of ever-changing technology. That's what we're talking about here, folks, protecting the farms, whether it's a hypothetical CFO or whether it's a future who knows what. We can't see into the future and know what the different technology is going to do. What we have to do is keep our options open, and this thing is going to foreclose all of those options. I would point out again, as I did last time, that if you are of a mind to approve this special exception over the negative recommendation of your APC, you have the right to place conditions on that, including the condition that it not operate as a bar to CFOs. You have the ability to do that, to place conditions. You could condition them to make this thing comply with the design rules of the Indiana State Building Codes. You could make it comply with the ADA. It does none of those things today. But you could make that a condition if you choose to approve it. We would ask that you deny it, but if you're of a mind to approve it, we would ask that you approve it with those conditions so that it does not operate to harm agriculture in this county. Thank you.
Rebuttal? Go ahead.
I might as well speak my piece again. Everybody else has. My name is Lisa King, and I live north of this property. Now, you've all brought up CFOs and agricultural use, ADA, and everything else. I think I would like the commission, the BZA area plan. No, we're not on area plan. We're on Board of Zoning Appeals. The Board of Zoning Appeals to remember that even whether they approve or whether they deny, that will not stop whoever's going to be against a CFO to be against a CFO or to be for a CFO. So if they approve it, saying you can't fight against a CFO because as long as we approve this, I think that you have to remember it's not going to stop that train from going down that road either way. But you have to remember that it still goes back to it's a petition. Each petition has to be considered individually. And I think that Mr. Rucker, he did say something that kind of upset me. because he said, well, there's been motorcyclists there and they're in the dark and pull them out in the road in the dark. People turn on their lights when they pull out in the dark, and it's been summer and they've been out there and, till 9 o'clock at night because it's light out. We are not stupid here. But, I just want to let you know that. But, you just have to think what is best overall. Yes, agriculture is what this county is about. It's got a lot of empty land. They've been through the wind farm fight. I don't even know where that wind farm fight is anymore. I quit following it. But that's the same area they want wind farms in. I'm not against wind farms. But you can't have wind farms and a hog farm at the same place. So, it's where you want your development to go. It's what you want your development to do. You've got to listen to your people, and you guys have to make a decision. But you do need to remember that it is one petition. It's not and honestly, even though we all are standing here in our own little world and giving our own little piece, it's really not a matter of life and death. There's a lot more important things in life.
Thank you. Rebuttal?
Again, I think I've hit a lot of these already. We'll touch base on them briefly. I think we're rehashing a lot of the same points back and forth. But again, Mr. Rocker bringing up a couple things that I will address, the ADA and that. We are willing to have conditions. One, we are of the belief, it was also staff's belief, that it did not need to meet that requirement for this. If it was deemed that it was necessary through the permitting process or through anything we would need to do, we'd be willing to make sure we complied with what we needed to. That is actually required by state law or is actually required by the Fayette County ordinance. We're of the belief in our review that it is not. So we're willing to concede that. We'd be willing to do what was necessary to bring it up to those compliance methods. As for, again, most of the arguments, it keeps coming back as much as any group says it is or isn't. It's about CFOs. It keeps coming back to that. It's about the money. It's about what could come. It's about potential growth. It's about things that are coming out there. Again, that's not what we are here about tonight. We're here petitioning for a special exception on something that is allowed by your ordinances in this location to come before you for a special exception. And that's what we're here for. We believe it is a good spot. There may not be a mountain next door or whatever, but I grew up here. I think it's a pretty nice area out there. The neighbors like it. They're using it. So I'm not here to say whether it's the best park in the county or the worst park in the county, but we believe it's a pretty good spot for a park that is being used. With that being said, it's not about the quality or what it is. Well, it is getting used. People are liking it. You heard from one of the neighbors here tonight. As far as that the A1 prime agricultural and that this will impede growth and all those and unintended consequences and what may or may not come from tonight forward out of this thing, we're not here to set that. You guys get to set what that is. But you can change, again, you could change your CFO ordinance later to change the distance to them. You could change one of those to not take this into consideration, or that a park is bigger. You have the right to change all these. We're just living with what it is written as today. We're trying to follow the rules as they're written today, and that's what we've applied for. And that's all we're asking for, because we're asking for us to get a fair shake. That's why the laws are there, that's why the ordinances are there, so that every resident gets their fair chance to do what they would like to do with their property. And that's really all we're asking for. As for the Right to Farm Act, it's talking about negligent lawsuits coming after the fact, and Mr. Rocker brought up the idea that it also can discourage it. Again, we're not discouraging anything. If they're discouraged, it would be from the ordinance after this is in, that they're not allowed to do it within an area. Again, this has to stand alone. It needs to be heard on its merits alone, with or without the other. We can't choose then what a neighbor or what a county would allow to be built next to it. You get to decide that through your zoning ordinances, and you could change those, reevaluate them, adjust them as you see fit in the future. Really I'll leave it at that in summary and allow you to deliberate. I'd be glad to answer any questions that came out of any of the comments or from the remonstrators, but I'll end it at that.
Any questions?
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to present.
All right, and now close the public portion of this petition. And now we're open for discussion. I'd like to make one comment. And you can correct me, Jeff, if I'm wrong, but when we consider this petition, we really can't consider whether we think that's a good place for a park, or it's got pretty trees, or it has pretty mountains. That really doesn't relate to what we have to vote on tonight at all. So I recommend that, that everybody on the board realizes that you don't get to pick where they like the park. That's not what this is about. This is whether they can put the park there or not. It's just part of it, right?
I would say that's not our job, is to describe whether it would be
And like I said, I'm not for or against. I'm just listening. I'm just stating the fact that we can't consider that part of it. That's your business. Okay. All right.
I think at the same time, this is not about the CFO, but on one hand it is, because what we decide here tonight can affect the CFO. So I think that's important to think about too when we make our vote.
And not just that Dora's.
Right,
CFO.
any CFO.
Any CFO.
Any potential what we decide here tonight can dictate that.
Right.
That's a fair point.
And changing ordinances is not an easy thing to do.
I was there all 6 years. It is not easy.
That also is not their problem. That's our problem.
Yeah.
That's something we gotta fix, if we're gonna fix it. And I'm not trying to shut anybody down, but I agree with you that it will affect all CFOs in the future, whether it be theirs or those people back there or whoever. It's gonna affect everybody.
Yeah.
But that's not what we have today.
Right.
Any other discussion? Okay. Take a motion.
I move to deny the special exception application.
Okay. Can we do it with so you are to accept the unfavorable recommendation?
Yes. I move to accept their unfavorable recommendation, thereby denying the special exception.
And I would ask that we add language as to why. Okay, that
From
can be
each person or from my specific?
No, for your motion. That can be specifically that as such, you find
Okay, that's
that
fine.
Mr.
I'm
the
ready for
report
that.
was accurate, or what specific prongs you have issue with.
Yeah, sure, I'm fine with that. I just wasn't sure if that was appropriate here, or my understanding is usually it's in the written.
Right, but we're not writing something that wasn't stated here.
That's
right?
fine. No, I move to accept the unfavorable recommendation, deny the special exception, based partially on the staff report, but specifically the item that I have most concern with, and the item I feel is the main reason, is unintended consequences. That would be item number 6, and so. Do I need the citation on that?
No.
Item number 6, the unintended consequences, and mostly unintended consequences to all of agriculture in that region.
By 6, she means F. We've called them.
Lots of different things.
Right.
Unintended consequences.
F, but the 6 criteria, yes.
Okay.
I second the motion. I got detrimental to general welfare, will impede improvement and development. I also had a lot of questions about the adequate utilities and the necessary facilities. It says they have been or are being provided, and I don't think they have been, because there's no electricity and there are no utilities there.
Are you okay to include that as part of your motion?
The only one I don't agree with is the utilities one, and that's just because I don't know that it necessarily has to have it for this particular one. But I think that's an opinion. So,
sure.
But really, we only need one. do I need to amend it? I thought you were asking all of them to say what they were for, but you just want specifically in my motion.
Correct. Now we can have everybody state it and just you amend your motion to include all their commentaries. But I just want the findings of fact to be what we voted on tonight.
Then I will amend my motion to include everyone's. I guess I'm not sure.
Well, I was saying it, and I thought I had to give my reasons.
I don't think we need to, like, open it up to.
Yeah,
you know,
I believe.
Someone could say a
I
comment.
think what we're saying is we're essentially agreeing with the staff report. I mean, almost everything except for utilities, I think, is included.
I agree. So I'm going to amend my motion one time and only one time, and my motion now is I move to accept the unfavorable recommendation from the Area Plan Commission and deny the bill's application for special exception. My reasoning is based on the staff report we were provided. Period. End of sentence.
Get that?
Yeah.
Okay, now, I'll take that second motion again, please,
I'll second the motion again.
as presented, right?
Yes. Whatever makes you guys all happy.
It's not about that. It's about the detail. We have to do this right. Okay. All right, there's been a motion made and properly seconded to approve the recommendation, that we give a non-favorable recommendation to this, and that we deny the recommendation, or deny the petition. Yep.
Will you do roll call?
Roll call?
Carrie Steele,
Yes.
Bill Crawford,
Yes.
Jeff Fisher,
Yes.
Ruby Seiler,
Now, I'm voting yes for it, not to have it, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Correct.
I just don't want to say the right thing at the wrong time. I want to make sure I'm saying what.
so you said what?
I do not want it.
So she's saying yes to the recommendation.
Favorable recommendation.
Well, I was told it's yes or no.
Leota,
Yes.
Okay. And it looks like the petition was turned down. They have the right to appeal.
Yes, there's courts, yeah.
There
always is.
You have the right to appeal, and you'd have to go with Bill and just
No, I mean, it goes to court.
goes to court. Okay.
Goes to court.
All right, that's that part of it.
Okay, now, you would be so kind. Pass that down to Bev.
All right. Next on the agenda is the appeal hearing for the special exception for concentrated
Yeah.
cleaning operation.
Yeah, and
Number
the-
14827.
Yep. And the essential part of it is that, okay, it's, yeah, I don't know why people do things that are happening to me, and then with my time after that initial hearing. So the result was that, yes, I did not, in a timely manner, review the submission for the door confined feeding operation. I did not do that in a timely manner. Matter of fact is, I did not start that until after I prepared the staff report for the, as requested by the Area Plan Commission, for the initial hearing, to have a complete staff report for Bill's initial hearing. So that is, and so, the reasons being made, that is correct. The second part is, shall we review it for the application for the completeness? Once again, I was late with that. I did not do that in a timely manner. That is correct. Nor did I then send the notice to the applicant indicating to Mr. Doerr's team that, okay, it was missing the one report, the water report, the deficiencies. And that as such is that I should not have then set the petition, the hearing date, and then for the advertising for the hearing. And so essentially is that, well, it should still be waiting for them to get me get the missing report before I could have even got to this particular point. So as Mr. Bills has referred to, is that the lack of the completeness for an actual full, proper application. And that is me. You know, all the reasons with it.
And I'd like to make a comment on, not to defend Bill so much as the fact that I know that he was going through a pretty terrible situation at that time. And I also have worked in that office, and I know his workload is very heavy at times. And during that process there of what he was going through, I don't really think anybody should put him down or his position down for what he did or didn't do in this particular case. So, I just want to make that statement.
And
We'll talk about your remedy potential.
yeah, the potential remedy, because really it should not have been, it should still be out there.
Can I ask a question real quick? When was the first initial, I just kind of clarifying this timeline.
Okay,
Okay, when was the first initial application received from Mr. Dorr?
on the July 8th.
Okay, that's all.
Yes, that's when the application was received for that, yes. Yep. And then that's what led into the many, many other things.
Your remedy is,
So Bill would like me to give the statement of the remedy. It is his idea, and I think it's, we'll see how people take it. But essentially, his thoughts are that this is not a completed application, that this should have never been submitted as a completed application because it's not in fact complete. He would agree with the Bill's appeal stating that it is not a complete application. As such, his request or his recommendation to this board would be that they treat it as such and not consider it to be an application to the board, to either the APC nor the BZA, and allow him to work with the Doras to complete the application and then submit it, which would then effectively take the Doras off of any calendared meeting at this point in time, and it would be as if it's not been submitted for approval or denial.
Essentially, we're asking for a withdrawal, or is
No,
that
it's not withdrawal.
It's not that word.
No, because it didn't even get to the point to actually withdraw. Because the idea is that, okay,
I see what you. I guess how I'm asking more specifically. I'm asking Jeff if
basically
we
it's,
go down this
it's
path.
resetting the clock essentially.
If we go down as we go down this path, what words do we need to use to make sure that we have the?
Well, I don't know that there are words in the rules of procedure, okay, to effectively. I think what has happened is it was a wrongfully submitted application that was approved and accepted by the planning director
As a complete application.
as a complete application. I think at this point I think the language I would like to use is consider it as a non-complete application. Remedy that if that can be remedied. This may never be
And then put it on
fully
the
submitted
agenda
again.
at that time.
Put it on the agenda as if it is ever a fully, essentially effective application.
Complete application.
Yeah.
so we need a motion for that.
Well,
Can I say this in layman's terms? So basically, Bill received the application, it wasn't complete. That's fine, those things happen. And Bill, due to other circumstances, did not note that, put it on the calendar. So now we're gonna not really withdraw, we're just not like we never received it, that's fine.
yeah, it's basically that it
And
has,
then you're
it's
gonna
been,
say- You're gonna say, look, Bill's gonna say to them, this is a non-complete application,
Yes.
please resubmit.
Yes.
Get everything we
The rules effectively state that Bill has an obligation to say, hey, this is not a complete application. Here's what you have to do to remedy this before I can do anything with it.
Okay,
Um,
and that's basically what we're gonna do.
That's what we're discussing anyway.
Right.
I think because we're at the appellate status at this, and I think it impacts a couple of appeals that have been filed, I think it would make sense for both sides to be able to speak on this. And I don't really have a preference who goes first. Sounds like Mr. Jones is ready to go.
Well, it's
so.
our appeal, so.
Sure.
You've made it much briefer.
That was the idea, everybody.
Are you okay with us conceding?
You almost not like me talking, so.
Are you okay with the idea that we're conceding that this is?
Of course they're
I'd be so disappointed. I had like 80 slides to go through.
Yeah, I figured that'd be the case even after the last time around.
No, the only point of clarification I would like to have is that if you vote as Mr. Westling has recommended, that there would be no pending application by the Doors for a CFO, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because, like you said, yeah, no pending application just means it's incomplete. Then once I get the water report that is missing from the document, we can move forward.
Well, it would have to be resubmitted and all of the other.
It would all have to be resubmitted.
Correct.
Correct. I mean, we're treating this as if there is essentially never been a submission. Now I would like Mr. Rocker, if you want to speak on Mr. Doer's behalf, or if Mr. Doer would like to speak on this issue.
Hang on, if we do that, is this a path that you are comfortable with?
Well, we've specifically asked for this.
Yeah, that's what we've asked for.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
I think this is honestly procedurally proper.
Okay, that's
That's what we're trying to do, is just to get everything back to where it should
It's
be.
almost verbatim, the last slide.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, Mr. Rucker, you got anything?
Is everybody else done?
Looks like it.
All right. I think we had already said that we would do that, so I think we would just repeat that.
Okay.
So the only question I would have is will we then receive the letter as if it had been inside the 10-day notice?
Yes.
So that we have a complete file, so that we don't have to revisit whether this counted as that? Or...
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine.
And go ahead and make part of it as that, then upon the receipt, the immediate review within the 10 days to, and I think it would be appropriate then also not to, with Mr. Dora's team, but also to Mr. Bill's attorneys also. The copy of the letter, I think, would also be appropriate, that it's been done, this is complete. And then, of course, when it comes in, get the application to package to everybody.
Sure. So I think just to clear that up, I think what we're saying is some of the same documents, he can reuse those.
Yeah.
But they still have to be, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, notice requirements, everything needs to.
Nothing's been done.
Right. Go ahead and speak.
Slightly other than that. I agree that notice will have to be resubmitted. I agree with that piece, but I think what it contemplates is, in the rule, an application is filed.
Correct.
Documents are submitted, fees paid. Within 10 days, that person, whoever it is, gets a letter from Bill that says, thumbs up, or you're missing something.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
It's still been filed, it has not been completed, it cannot be placed on the docket.
Correct.
That doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Yeah.
That means that there are missing elements that need to be remedied. You wouldn't tell that person if they were missing if Bill's had failed to submit a survey, you don't say, bad bills, you didn't file an application, you have to start all over at square one. You say, here's my 10-day letter, you're missing a survey that was required, please submit the survey. Once I receive that, you can place it on the docket. I don't think we're saying it hasn't ever been filed. I think we're saying it isn't going to be placed on the agenda.
Is that what your paperwork?
So does that mean everything that receives that letter didn't happen? And if so, are they subject to the next month's filing deadlines? Or I don't see that is what happens in your rules.
If I could address something quickly, your rules specifically provide for this, and I know from listening to Mr. Rocker twice today how important following rules are. APC Rule 5.11 provides incomplete applications shall be deemed as not having been filed. There's absolutely no discretion that this board can exercise that would allow them to amend an incomplete filing. It is by rule, by ordinance.
The application, the actual application package, yeah.
It is deemed to have not been filed. So I think as Mr. Westling said, there is no application which can be amended at this point. We have to start from ground zero.
Right, but if, in that case, under 5.1.1, then they would have the right to remedy that application.
I don't know what you mean by remedy. They could refile an application.
Okay. They don't, so if someone receives a letter from Bill saying these 2 things are missing, or these 8 things are missing, they don't then start over, they then supply those 8 things.
That's not how we read your rules.
Okay.
It's 5.11.
And we read them that way. And in point of fact, the bills was missing all of the data that was pointed out during the prior hearing about no utility information, no drainage information, no permit was built illegally. All those things would have been equally applicable.
Should have appealed. We had a complete application.
Okay, please not, but
It's been a long night, everybody.
Well, don't you have to fill out an application before you build anything or set anything on the
Well,
ground?
we're not talking about the construction application, Ruby.
Okay.
Okay.
It's okay.
That's all right. That's all right. It's a long night.
So our interpretation is, Jeff?
he's working on it.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I guess it does say incomplete application shall be deemed as not having not been filed. But I guess I don't know what goes into the application process if they can be given all their documents back and then just essentially hand them back over. Is that problematic?
I find lots of problems in it, right?
Okay.
I mean, do I have to now file another fee?
No.
Do I have another
I
deadline that isn't stated in the
I think
in
the fee.
packet?
I think we could waive the fee. I mean, clearly this was our error. I think we can waive the fee. I mean, I think we can figure out the fee. A fee has been paid for this application. Now, I agree that the rule states that shall be deemed as not having not been filed. But if it was never filed, then they should have never been assessed a fee. I mean, I think that's how we get around that. Okay. Now, what are the other issues?
What is the deadline for the new filing?
To get on, it depends on what agenda you want to get on. I would argue there is probably not a deadline. It just would be determinate on when.
Whenever you submit it, that's when you get on the.
That's when you would be heard. Does that make sense? Whatever rules we have for to be heard in November, to be heard in December.
I think that does make sense. I just don't find that in I think what we're finding is the same issue we've had previously, which just doesn't speak to something. And so we're forging new territory, and
Sure.
that's the issue. We're trying to live draft rules of procedure.
Looking for nuance where it seems there isn't.
Is it appropriate? I mean, I'm not looking at that, but if it is deemed that if there's no application, and given the situation, like if it's the same as not receiving one, I'm of a mind to just say, start over.
And we're
Well-
reimbursing his.
Reimburse the fee?
Well, because I think it's silly to reassess a new fee because we're essentially effectively saying that no filing ever happened. And if no filing
I
ever
agree that
happened,
that's
then
not
you
what
didn't
happened, yeah. I
Right.
mean, so either A, waive the fee, or B, reimburse the fee.
reimburse the fee and have them redo the fee.
Well,
Because if we don't, is the
we are
fee,
set up with the county to reimburse the fee.
if in my, when I'm looking at implications on submittal and those kinds of things, clearly they're gonna use the same sets of it's gonna be mostly the same things. They're, regardless of how we phrase it, they're gonna have to redo public notice, correct? Because of timing?
Yes, I think they're gonna have to redo public notice anyway. I think the language is, again, makes us, because it says incomplete application shall be deemed as having not been filed, and I think submitted probably would have been fully submitted, might have been a better language there, because
But since we don't have that, I mean, I think we're kind of stuck.
we just have to go, and I think that
It's not fair. I don't know that it's fair, I don't know that it's right, but that's what the language is.
Yeah, well, let's try to hash it out so we don't have to appeal over this interpretation.
I think it sounds like the Bills are on board with this issue. It sounds like the Doras probably are frustrated by this fact.
But, well, number one is the information is just there, because all it really takes is the inserting the one missing document.
That's kind of where I was thinking it would go. It just may be as silly as resubmitting everything.
Understood.
You are right, we really do need to work on those things.
I think we should move upon that, and
I
I
wrote
think
some of it
that, I think
down.
that takes care of both pending appeals.
I just think that.
Correct.
Very good.
Thank you.
I move to consider the DORA application as our rules of procedure dictate to consider that it was incomplete, therefore it was not filed. And they will have to resubmit if they would like to be back on.
Resubmit the document, that's once the documents are submitted, I
And
review.
reproof of
I review
notification
immediately
and
within the
receipt.
10 days, and then notice, and then also application package goes to all.
Okay, you lost the secretary here.
I don't think
It's a
that- I
good
don't
thing
think
we
that
have
your
this
part-
on
Bill,
video.
Bill,
No,
Bill.
because I'm lost.
Bill, I don't
People have
think
already said
that
I don't
your requirements need to be in my motion.
Okay.
Do you agree?
I agree. Just
Okay.
that we've effectively considered the Dora's petition to have not been filed. We would waive filing fees or, let's make a decision on that. Do you want to waive filing fee, or do you want to?
I don't know whether the county will reimburse, so.
No, county won't reimburse.
Will
I think
not,
it,
or-
no.
Okay.
I think it is appropriate because a fee has been paid.
I move that we
Because-
consider the DORA application as not filed because it's incomplete, and we will waive any resubmittal fee associated with potential someday resubmittal.
Yeah.
If not resubmitted, the money's forfeited to the
Yeah,
county of
the
Fayette
coffers
forever.
of Fayette County, the vast.
Well, you can go back and look at that. Ben, you have to- Okay,
I second it. Thanks.
all right, we had a motion made and properly seconded to, what she said.
Yeah.
I
Do
won't
what
try to
she said.
reword it. Okay. All those in favor? Oh, let's do a roll call. Let's do a roll call.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
Carrie Steele,
Yes.
Bill Crawford,
Yes.
Jeff Fisher,
Yes.
Ruby,
Yes.
and Leota.
Yes.
All in favor.
All right, motion made and properly and passed. All right, and I'd like to apologize personally to everyone here for what happened in the time zone that happened, not because of Bill, but because of his circumstances, but.
There's no apology necessary. We thought the failing was on the Doors not to provide the correct application.
Yeah, well, we don't even know
There
that,
were
but,
personal aspersions.
but anyhow. all
Well,
right,
it's
I'll take a-
just, yeah.
I'll take a motion.
They gave you
For the
a-
director's report,
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
I move to accept the director's report as written.
Second.
All right, and then motion made and properly seconded to accept the director's report as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I second.
And a motion made and properly
Leota
seconded
jumped
to
right
adjourn.
on that one.
Adjourn.
I wish
All
I
those
could
in
have voted
favor?
on that
Aye.
one.
It's time.